Listen here, child. Gather close now, 'cause what I was about to tell you ain't just words on the wind. This here's memory made flesh, blood soaked into red Georgia clay. A story that the big house tried to bury, but the quarters kept breathing life into generation after generation. They called her Lily du Asso. Some folks whispered it with fear, others with something like reverence. In them days of deep sorrow, when cotton was king and black bodies was just another crop to harvest, there walked a woman who carried 600 scars on her back like a map of our people's suffering. 600 lashes, child. 600 times the whip sang its devil song across her flesh, and 600 times she refused to break. Now you see, people, this ain't no fairy tale where Jesus swoops down and makes everything right. This is the truth of Ironwood Plantation in the year of our Lord, 1845. Where the Mississippi River rolled past like it didn't care, where magnolias bloomed white as lies, and where a man named Master Elias Hawthorne ruled with scripture in one hand and bullwhip in the other. But before the 600, before the blood, before the fire that would consume Ironwood like divine judgment, there was a birth, and that's where we begin. In them days of deep sorrow, under a harvest moon, fat and yellow as old fear, a woman named Rose gave birth in the slave quarters of Ironwood Plantation. Wasn't no midwife present, wasn't no gentle hands to catch that baby, just Rose alone in the dark, biting down on a leather strap, her body splitting itself open while the overseer, Mr. Cyrus Boone, paced outside like death, waiting for an invitation. Lord have mercy, the pain that woman endured would have killed a lesser soul. But Rose, she was strong-backed, one of them fierce women. What worked the cotton fields from can't see to can't see. Her hands tough as tree bark, her spirit something the whip couldn't quite reach. She'd been sold to Ironwood 3 years prior, belly already swollen with child, bought cheap 'cause Master Hawthorne figured a breeder was good investment. The quarters that night, sweet Jesus, you could feel the ancestors hovering close. Old wise ones among the enslaved folk said the air was thick with haint energy, that the bottle trees outside was rattling, though there weren't no wind. Folks swear on their lives they heard African drums beaten soft somewhere deep in the cypress swamp, though nobody dared admit to playing them. That's how it was in the quarters. Some things you heard but never spoke of. Some truths you carried quiet as hidden prayer. Rose labored alone 'cause that was the rule. Master Hawthorne, he didn't want no fussing and carrying on disturbing his sleep up in the big house. Man of iron, they called him. But the old ones knew better. They called him Cursed One. Damned, a soul already sold to the devil for his cotton profits. When that baby finally came, great God in heaven. The silence that followed was heavier than chains. No cry, just Rose's ragged breathing and the sound of her own heart breaking. She pulled that child to her chest, still connected by the cord, and whispered prayers in a language she'd learned from her own mama. Words that came from across the middle passage, from the motherland itself. Then the baby's eyes opened. Lord of glory. Them eyes was wide and knowing, like she'd already seen everything there was to see about this cruel world, like she was born. Remember in the auction block the whip, the sold-away kin. Eyes too old for a newborn. Eyes that made even the darkness seem to lean back. And that's when she cried. Not the weak mooing of most babies, but a sound that cut through the night like a conjure woman's calling. Strong and clear and full of rage. Outside, Cyrus Boone heard it and smiled. That's a healthy one, he muttered, already calculating what she'd be worth in 15 years. Good lungs, she'll pick fast. But Rose, suffering so bad, bleeding into the straw mattress, her life draining away with every heartbeat. She held that baby close and whispered the music, only gift she had left to give. Lily, your name is Lily, and you going to be beautiful and strong. And one day, her voice broke like dry wood. One day, baby girl, you going to be free. Folks say Rose died with her eyes open, staring at something nobody else could see. Some said she was looking at the North Star through the cracks in the cabin roof. Others claimed she was seeing the ancestors come to carry her home. The old ones wrapped her body in burlap and buried her at the edge of the plantation under a live oak where the Spanish moss hung low like mournful veils. They planted sweet grass on her grave, traditional gullah away, though Master Hawthorne would have whipped anyone caught doing African foolishness. But in the quiet of the quarters at night, we kept our ways. We had to. It was all we had left. Baby Lily didn't cry when they took her from her mama's dead arms, didn't cry when the old women passed her around, each one whispering blessings and warnings. Sister Ruth, eldest among the quarters, held that child up to the moonlight and declared, "This one got something special in her. Mark my words, she either going to save us all or doom us trying." Cyrus Boone came at first light to inspect the baby. He turned her this way and that, checking her limbs like she was livestock. "She'll do," he grunted. "Put her with Mama D till she's big enough to work." Mama D was the nurse made for slave children, an ancient woman whose own babies had all been sold downriver years ago. She took Lily without a word. But that night, in the darkness of her cabin, she performed a rootwork ritual that the old ones still talk about. Took some gopher dust, graveyard dirt mixed with sulfur and salt, and drew a circle of protection around that baby. Whispered prayers to Oceanan, to the Virgin Mary, to Jesus, to the ancestors, to any power that might listen. "This child was born with her eyes open too wide," Mama D muttered, "and that's already a crime in this God-forsaken place. Lord, watch over her. She going to need all the protection heaven and earth can give. In them days, you see, a black child born too aware, too strong, too defiant, that was dangerous. The masters wanted workers, not warriors. They wanted broken spirits, not burning souls. But Lily, from that very first night, there was something in her that refused to be extinguished. As she grew through her first year, even the other enslaved folks noticed. She learned to walk early, run before most babies could toddle. Her eyes tracked everything, every movement of the overseer, every whispered conversation, every hidden act of resistance. By the time she was 3, she could repeat entire spirituals after hearing them once. By 5, she was asking questions that made the adults nervous. "Why we here and they up there?" she asked Sister Ruth one day, pointing at the big house. "Hush your mouth, child," Sister Ruth whispered, fearful eyes darting around. "Don't be asking them kind of questions." But Lily just stared with them knowing eyes. Mama D says, "I was born with questions." Says, "I came out the womb wanting answers." And she was right. The child was born reaching for something she couldn't name yet, something called freedom, something called justice, something the whip and chains couldn't kill no matter how hard they tried. Master Hawthorne first took real notice of Lily when she was 7 years old. He was riding through the quarters on his black stallion, surveying his property when he saw her standing still as a carved statue, staring right back at him. Most slave children learned early to drop their eyes to make themselves small and invisible. But not Lily. "That Rose's girl?" he asked Cyrus Boone. "Yes, sir. Good worker already. Strong for her age." Hawthorne studied her with cold calculation. She got a rebellious look about her. Watch that one close. That night in the quarters, the old ones gathered around Lily. Mama D, now bent with age but still fierce in spirit, held the girl's face in her weathered hands. "Listen here, child," she said, her voice like gravel and honey mixed. "You carry your mama's strength and that's a blessing, but it's also a burden. This world we in it don't want us strong, it wants us broke. You understand?" Music. Lily nodded, though she was only 7. "The ancestors watching you," Mama D continued. "Rose's spirit watching you. And they all waiting to see what you going to do with that fire burning inside you. But remember this, fire can warm or fire can destroy. You got to learn which and when." The child born with her eyes open too wide just smiled. A strange, unsettling smile for one so young. "I already know, Mama D," she whispered. "I've been knowing since before I was born." And folks swear on their lives that in that moment the candles in the cabin flickered though there weren't no breeze, and somewhere deep in the swamp an owl cried 3 times, ancient omen of change coming. The night Rose died given birth, the night Lily came into this world of chains and sorrow. Something shifted in the spiritual realm around Ironwood Plantation. The old ones felt it, the root doctors knew it. Even the overseer, drunk on corn whiskey, woke up sweating from dreams he couldn't remember but couldn't shake. A child was born, her mama's blood soaked into the quarter's dirt floor. Her first cry was a declaration of war she didn't know she was making yet. And the whipping post waited. By the time Lily turned 9 years old, she was already, music, the strongest child in the quarters. While other young'uns was still playing in the dirt or helping with small chores, Lily was carrying water from the creek to the fields, toting buckets that grown men struggled with, her shoulders broad, her back straight despite the weight, her eyes still burning with that known fire. Folks called her Water Girl, but it wasn't no simple task. Lord have mercy. The creek was a good half-mile from the cotton fields, and in the suffering heat of Georgia summer, July and August, when the sun beat down like God's own fury, them field hands needed water constant. Master Hawthorne, cheap as dirt and twice as cruel, wouldn't spare no mule for Water Holland, so it fell to the children. But Lily, she made it her mission. Every day from first light till the evening bell, she walked that path so many times her feet wore a permanent trail in the red clay. 2 wooden buckets hung from a yoke across her shoulders, sloshing and heavy, cutting into her young flesh till calluses formed thick as leather. "Child, you go break yourself," Mad warned her one morning when Lily's hands was bleeding from the rope handles. "Can't break what's already bent," Lily replied, her voice steady as prayer. "Them folks out there in that field, they dying of thirst. Master won't give them proper water breaks, so I will." And she did. Morning after morning through rain and burning sun. Through days when her own stomach was empty and her own thirst was screaming, Lily carried water. She became a fixture of Ironwood. That small, strong-backed girl with buckets bigger than her torso, marching through the cotton rows like a soldier on mission. The field hands loved her. They called her Little Moses sometimes, though always in whispers 'cause that name carried dangerous weight. When she approached with her buckets, they'd straighten up from their bent-over picking just for a moment and drink deep. Some thanked Jesus, some thanked Lily, some just drank in silence, tears mixing with the water, grateful for this one small mercy in a merciless world. But Master Hawthorne, evil-hearted soul that he was, he noticed. And what he noticed, he resented. "That girl's slowing down my workers," he complained to Cyrus Boone one afternoon. "Every time she brings water, they stop picking. Time is money." "She's just a child, sir," Boone replied, though even he, cruel as he was, had a grudging respect for Lily's work ethic. "I don't care if she's a child or a full-grown buck," Hawthorne snapped. "I want her work pace cut in half. She brings water twice a day only, morning and noon. That's it." When Lily heard this new rule, something in her young hardened like iron and fire. She knew what it meant. Field hands would suffer more, would collapse from heat stroke, would be whipped for slowing down when really they was just dying of thirst. So she did what any warrior would do. She defied the order. She kept bringing water at her regular pace, sneaking extra trips when Cyrus Boone wasn't watching, hiding buckets at the edge of the field so folks could grab drinks without being seen. It was her first real act of resistance, her first time choosing her people over the master's command. Old folks say that summer of 1854 was the hottest on record. The sun hung in the sky like a curse, and the cotton fields shimmered with heat waves that made the world look like it was melting. 3 field hands collapsed in June alone. One of them, a young, strong-backed man named Samuel, never got up again. Heat stroke took him right there between the rows. His last words a whisper. "Water, please." Lily was there when it happened. She was coming with her buckets, but she was too late. She knelt beside Samuel's body, her small hand touching his still warm face, and something broke open inside her. Rage. Pure righteous rage. "This ain't right," she said to Sister Ruth, who was weeping nearby. "Ain't right that we got to die for their cotton, for Clear's throat their money, for their comfort." "Hush now, child," Sister Ruth begged. "Don't speak such thoughts aloud." But Lily stood up, water bucket still on her shoulders, and actually shouted across that field. "Y'all hear me? We ain't mules, we ain't beasts, we is people, music, and we deserve water when we thirsty." The silence that followed was deathly quiet. Music. Every field hand froze. Every picker stopped mid-motion, and from his horse at the edge of the field, Cyrus Boone heard every word. He rode over slow, deliberate, music, his face twisted in fury. "What did you just say, girl?" Lily, 9 years old, skinny as a rail but standing tall, repeated herself. "I said we deserve water, and we going to have it." Lord of glory, the audacity of that child. In them days, for an enslaved person, especially music, a child, to speak like that was court and death. But Lily stood her ground, them knowing eyes blazing like her Mama Rose's spirit was burning inside music her. Boone climbed down from his horse. "You need to learn your place, girl. Music." Behind him, an old blind woman named Auntie Pearl. She'd been at Ironwood longer than anyone brought over from the motherland herself back in the 1790s, was sitting under a tree shade. She couldn't work no more, but Master Hawthorne kept her around as a reminder to others of what old age looked like in bondage. When she heard the commotion, she stood up on shaky legs and started shuffling toward the confrontation. "Don't you touch that child," Auntie Pearl called out in her cracked ancient voice. "She carrying mercy in them buckets. You got no right. Shut your mouth, old woman," Boone shouted. But Auntie Pearl kept coming, her blind eyes somehow seeming to, music, see more than any sighted person. That child got the ancestors with her. You harm her. You answer to spirits older than this plantation, older than this country, older than your white man's greed. Boone raised his hand to strike the old woman, and that's when Lily moved. Faster than thought. She swung one of her heavy water buckets and smashed it against Boone's arm. Water exploded everywhere, and the overseer stumbled backward in shock. The wooden bucket split in half, and Lily stood there holding just the broken handle, breathing hard, her whole body shaken with adrenaline and fear and something else, something like liberation. "Don't you touch her," Lily said quietly. "Don't you touch Auntie Pearl." Time seemed to stop. The field hands watched in horror and amazement. Auntie Pearl smiled a strange, satisfied smile, and Cyrus Boone, face red with rage and humiliation, grabbed Lily by her arms so hard it left bruises that lasted weeks. "You just earned yourself a trip to the post, girl," he hissed. The whipping posted ironwood stood in the center of the quarters, visible from everywhere, a deliberate placement. It was made of thick oak, worn smooth by the bodies that had been tied to it over the years, stained dark with old blood that rain couldn't wash away. Folks said if you put your ear to that post at night, you could hear the echoes of every scream ever cried there. That evening, as the sun was setting blood-red over the cotton fields, Cyrus Boone dragged Lily to the post. All the enslaved folks was forced to watch Master Hawthorne's standard practice, turning punishment into public lesson. They tied her hands to the iron ring, her small back exposed. She was just 9 years old, her shoulder blades like bird wings under her thin skin. Mama D tried to intervene. "Please, sir, she's just a child. She didn't mean no harm." 10 lashes, Boone announced, ignoring her. For defiance, for striking an overseer, and for disturbing the work. He raised the whip, that devil's tool, braided leather with bits of metal woven in to tear flesh more efficient. The first lash came down with a crack that echoed like gunfire. Lily screamed. "Lord, yes," she screamed. Wasn't no shame in it. 9 years old and feeling fire across her back, feeling her skin split open. But even through the pain, even through the blood that started running down her legs, something in her refused to beg. Second lash, third, fourth. By the 7th, she stopped screaming, went quiet. Not because the pain was less, but because she'd gone somewhere else in her mind, somewhere the old ones taught. A place where the ancestors dwelt, where pain couldn't reach. When it was over, they cut her down. She collapsed into Mad's arms, her back a mess of torn flesh and blood. The old woman carried her to the quarters, weeping the whole way. Other enslaved folks touching Lily's hand as she passed. Whispers of brave girl and strong soul following like prayers. That night in Mama D's cabin, the old women gathered to tend Lily's wounds. They used rootwork remedies, picuses made from comfrey and plantain, salves mixed with honey and whiskey, prayers whispered in African tongues and Baptist hymns mixed together. The pain was something terrible, hurting so bad that Lily drifted in and out of consciousness. But in her fever dreams, she saw her Mama Rose standing in a field of white flowers, music smiling sad and proud, and she heard a voice. Might have been Rose's, might have been the ancestors, might have been God himself. Whisper, "You got the strength, baby. You just got to learn how to use it." When Lily finally woke up 3 days later, her back was a map of scars that would never fully heal. But her spirit somehow that was stronger. Sister Ruth sat beside her bed. "Child, why you do it? Why you risk yourself for that old blind woman?" Lily turned her head, them knowing eyes clear despite the pain. "'Cause if we don't protect each other, who will? If I don't stand up when I see wrong, when do I stand up?" The old woman shook her head in wonder and worry. "You going to be the death of yourself, girl. Or the salvation of us all. I can't tell which yet." Lily, music, tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. Maybe both. From that day forward, something shifted in how the quarters saw Lily. She wasn't just the water girl no more. She was something else. A symbol. A promise. A spark of defiance in a place where defiance usually meant death. The children looked up to her. The field hands whispered her name with respect. Even the old ones, cautious and beaten down by years of suffering about music, saw in her a glimmer of hope they'd almost forgotten existed. And Lily, she healed slow, carrying them 10 scars on her back like badges. But as soon as she could walk without wincing, she picked up her water buckets again and returned to the fields. "What you doing, child?" Mama D asked, alarmed. "You need more rest, folks. Still thirsty?" "Music," Lily replied simply. "And I made a promise." She walked that half-mile to the creek, filled her buckets, and carried water to the fields just like before. Her back screamed with every step, the scars pulling and burning. But she didn't stop, couldn't stop. And when the field hands saw her coming, that small, fierce girl with her buckets and her scars and her unbroken spirit, some of them wept, not from sadness, but from something harder to name, recognition, music maybe, or hope. That night, as Lily finally settled into sleep, her body exhausted, but her soul strangely at peace, she made a private vow that nobody else heard. One day, I'ma carry something else. Not water, not buckets. One day, I'ma carry freedom itself, and I'ma give it to everybody who thirsts. Outside, the bottle trees rattled in the wind, and somewhere deep in the swamp, drums beat soft and steady. Ancient rhythm that said, "We hear you, daughter, we hear you, and the struggle ain't over yet." It was only just beginning. Now listen here, child, 'cause this part of the tale carries sweetness and sorrow mixed together like honey and salt, the kind of love that blooms in bondage, beautiful and doomed from the very start. Lily was 16 summers old when Josiah came to Ironwood, brought in chains from a plantation down in Alabama, where the master had died, and the estate was being sold off piece by piece, including human souls. Josiah was 18, tall as a cypress tree, with shoulders broad from years of blacksmith work. His hands were scarred from the forge, his skin dark as midnight, and his eyes, Lord have mercy. His eyes held a gentleness that seemed impossible for someone born into such cruelty. Master Hawthorne bought him for a high price, needing a strong buck to work the metal shop and shoe the horses. The first time Lily saw Josiah was at the water pump behind the quarters. She was filling her buckets, still carrying water after all them years. Her back now crisscrossed with more scars from other infractions, other defiances. He was washing the road dust from his face, his wrists still raw from the slave cough chains that had brought him here. Their eyes met, and folks swear on their lives that in that moment something passed between them that was older than slavery, deeper than oppression, something the ancestors themselves recognized and blessed. "You the water girl they've been talking about?" Josiah asked, his voice deep and warm like summer thunder rolling in from distant hills. Lily nodded, suddenly shy in a way she'd never been before. "And you? The new blacksmith, I reckon?" "That's what they tell me I am," he replied with a sad smile. "Though I prefer to think I'm just a man trying to survive. In them days of deep sorrow, love between enslaved folks was a dangerous thing. Master Hawthorne didn't encourage it, said it made workers distracted and soft, but he didn't forbid it neither long as it produced more slaves to sell. So courtship happened in stolen moments, in glances across the cotton fields, in whispered words during Sunday rest, in the hush harbors where folks gathered to pray away from white eyes. Over the following weeks, Lily and Josiah found ways to be near each other. She'd bring water to the metal shop, lingering longer than necessary. He'd volunteer to repair her water buckets when they broke, taking his sweet time with the work. They spoke in that careful way of people who know their time is borrowed. Their words weighted with meanings that went deeper than the surface. "You got fire in you," Josiah told her one evening as they sat outside the quarters, twilight painting the sky purple and gold. "I seen it the first day. You ain't like most folks here. You ain't broken." "I've been whipped music plenty," Lily replied, her voice quiet. "Got the scars to prove it." "Scars ain't the same as broken," Josiah said, reaching out slow and careful to touch her hand. "Scars just mean you survived. Broken means you stopped fighting, and you still got fighting every breath you take." Sweet Jesus. The way that man saw her really saw her, not just the slave or the water girl or the troublemaker, but her. It awakened something in Lily's heart she didn't even know was music sleeping. She'd spent so long being strong, being the one others leaned on, that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be held up herself. Their love grew like wildflowers in secret, music places, beautiful, persistent, refusing to be trampled. They met at the creek at midnight when the overseer was drunk and the paddy rollers was lazy. They carved their initials into the trunk of an old oak tree at the edge of the plantation. They whispered dreams of freedom, of a life up north where they could be husband and wife proper, where their children wouldn't be born into chains. "When we get free," Josiah would say, "I'ma build us a house with my own hands. Going to have a real bed, not no straw pallet. Going to have a table where we eat together without no master watching. Going to have land, our own land, and grow whatever we want." "When we get free," Lily would echo, letting herself believe it for just a moment. "I'ma never carry water for nobody but myself. Going to have a well, right outside my door, going to drink whenever I'm thirsty, and ain't nobody going to tell me no. Old folks say that summer of 1861 was when the world started changing. News came through the slave grapevine, that invisible network of whispered information that traveled faster than any master's mail, that a war was brewing between North and South. Some said it was about slavery, others said it was about state rights. But the enslaved folks knew any war that might shake up the current order was a war that carried possibilities. One night in late August, when the heat was still thick as molasses and the moon hung full and bright, Josiah took Lily's hand and led her deep into the woods, past the hush harbor, past where even the bravest souls usually ventured. They came to a clearing by the Savannah River, where the water rolled dark and mysterious, reflecting stars like scattered diamonds. "Lie," Josiah said, his voice trembling with something bigger than fear. "I know we ain't got no preacher to bless us, no papers to make it legal in the white man's world. But before God and the ancestors in this river that's seen more of our people's tears than any ocean, I want you to be my wife in spirit, in truth, in every way that matters." Lily's heart was beaten like African drums in her chest. She knew the danger, knew that attachments made you vulnerable, gave the master one more thing to take away, one more way to break you. But she also knew that to refuse love because of fear was to let slavery win even deeper. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Josiah, before God and the ancestors, I'm yours and you're mine." They held each other then under that full moon, and Josiah leaned down slow and tender and pressed his lips to hers. That kiss, sweet Lord. It was everything beautiful in a world designed to be ugly. It was rebellion and hope mixed together. It was a promise that even in bondage, even in suffering, the human spirit could still create something sacred. The kiss lasted just a moment, but in that moment was a whole lifetime of love and possibility. They didn't know they were being watched. Cyrus Boone, the overseer, that no good man with a shameless dog's heart, had been following them, suspicious of their midnight wanderings. He stood in the shadows, his face twisted with the particular cruelty of a man who resents seeing joy in people he considers property. The next morning, Josiah was working at the forge when Master Hawthorne rode up with Boone beside him. Lily was in the fields carrying water as always when she heard the commotion from the metal shop. "I got a buyer down in Georgia," Hawthorne was saying, his voice loud and cold. "Needs a strong blacksmith offering good money. You'll fetch a fine price, boy." Lily dropped her buckets and ran. Water splashed everywhere, but she didn't care. She arrived at the metal shop just in time to see Josiah being shackled, his face a mask of devastation. "No!" Lily screamed, pushing through the small crowd that had gathered. "Please, master, please don't sell him. I'll work double. I'll silence." Hawthorne roared. "This is what happens when slaves forget their place, when they start thinking they can have what they want instead of what I allow." Lily looked at Cyrus Boone, saw the satisfaction in his evil eyes, and understood. He told he'd seen their love and reported it, knowing exactly what would happen. She turned to Josiah, their eyes locking across the distance. He mouthed words. She'd carry forever. "I love you. Stay strong." They dragged him away that afternoon, didn't even let them say goodbye proper, just chained him to a wagon with 3 other slaves being sold downriver and drove off while the dust rose up like a dirty veil between them. Lily stood there long after the wagon disappeared, her body shaken with a grief so profound. It felt like something physical was being torn from her chest. Sister Ruth tried to lead her back to the quarters, but Lily jerked away. "No," she said, her voice strange and flat. "No, I got to. She walked back to the Savannah River, music to the spot where they'd kissed. She knelt in the dirt and pressed her palm against the earth as if she could somehow hold on to the memory. Trap it there so it couldn't fade. Music. That night in the quarters, Mama D found her sitting silent in the dark, dry-eyed, but broken in a way that was worse than tears. "He's gone," Lily said simply. "I know, baby. I know. They took him just like they took my mama. Just like they took everything I ever loved." Mama D wrapped her arms around the girl and finally, Lily cried. She cried like the child she'd never really gotten to be, cried like her heart was splitting apart, cried until her voice was and her eyes were swollen. But when the sun rose the next morning, When she stood up and faced another day in bondage, something in Lily had changed. The grief didn't disappear. It crystallized into something harder, colder, more music dangerous. She walked to that oak tree where they'd carved their initials. She pressed her scarred hand against the rough music bark and made a vow that the ancestors heard and recorded. I kept the taste of that kiss like someone keeps a knife inside their chest. And one day, this whole goddamn plantation going to pay for every stolen moment, every ripped art love, every destroyed dream. Great God in heaven. Now we come to the part of this tale that's hardest to tell, the part that makes even these old bones ache with remembered pain. Listen close, but prepare your heart, because what I's about to speak is the kind of suffering that changes a soul permanent tyke. That turns grief into something cold and sharp as a blade. 3 years passed after Josiah was sold away. 3 years of Lily burying her heart deep, of working from can't see to can't see, of carrying water and silence in equal measure. But the master, that evil-hearted devil Hawthorne, he had other plans for a woman like Lily. Strong, healthy, of breeding age. In his ledgers, she was listed as prime stock, and he meant to profit from her body whether she willed it or not. They brought a man to her cabin one night. His name was Samuel, not her Josiah's name, though Lily thought of him. A field hand from a neighboring plantation that Hawthorne had purchased specifically for breeding purposes. Samuel was a good man, gentle-souled despite his circumstances, and he approached Lily with apologies already on his lips. "I don't want this no more than you do," he whispered in the darkness of her cabin, where Cyrus Boone stood outside with a whip to ensure compliance. "But if we don't, they'll make it worse." So it happened. Not love, not choice, but survival. The ancestors, forgive me for speaking it plain, but this is the truth of how slavery worked. Our bodies weren't ours. Our choices weren't ours. Even the children we bore wasn't truly ours. 9 months later, in the winter of 1864, Lily gave birth to a boy. She labored alone, except for Mama D, who was so old now her hands shook, but her spirit was still fierce as ever. When that baby came out crying, Lily held him to her chest and felt something she thought had died when Josiah left. Hope. "I'ma name him Josiah," she told Mama D, after the man I loved, after the man who showed me that even in hell there can be moments of heaven. Little Josiah had his daddy's eyes, not Samuel's, but the Josiah she'd lost. Or maybe she just wanted to see them there. She nursed him, sang spirituals to him, traced the lines of his tiny face like she was memorizing scripture. For 3 months, she was something close to happy, or at least less broken. Then, Master Hawthorne came to the quarters with a well-dressed white man from Charleston, a slave trader with cold eyes and colder calculations. They inspected the baby like he was livestock, checking his limbs, his teeth when they came in, his overall health. "Good stock," the trader said. "Light skin, too. That'll fetch premium price in the Charleston market. I'll give you $400. $400. That's what her son was worth. That's what Master Hawthorne valued over a mother's love, over the bond between parent and child, over every natural law that even animals respect. "No," Lily said, clutching little Josiah tighter. "Please, Master, please don't take my baby. I'll work harder. The whip came down across her shoulders before she could finish. Cyrus Boone ripped the baby from her arms while she was still reeling from the blow. Little Josiah screamed, music, reaching his tiny hands back toward his mama and Lily. Lord have mercy. Lily lost her mind for a moment. She lunged at Boone, clawing at his face, music screaming words that wasn't even proper words, just pure animal grief. It took 3 men to drag her to the whipping post where they tied her tight while the slave trader carried her son away in a wicker basket like he was produce being hauled to market. They gave her 50 lashes that day, 50 stripes of fire across her back while her breasts leaked milk for a baby who was already miles away, already lost to her forever. But she didn't scream. Somewhere around the 20th lash, she went to that place in her mind where the ancestors dwelt, and she started counting. Music started keeping a tally. 50 for her first son. She'd remember, she'd add them, music up. And one day, she'd make them all count for something. The second baby came in 1866. A girl this time, born in the spring when the magnolia was blooming white and sweet, music, their scent mingling with the ever-present smell of sweat and cotton. Lily named her Rose after her own mama and tried. Lord knows she tried not to love her too much, not to music attached too deep, knowing what was coming. But how do you not love your own child? How do you look at them, tiny fingers wrapping around yours and not feel your heart break open with tenderness. So Lily loved her daughter, fierce and desperate, stealing every moment she could, nursing her not just with milk, but with whispered stories of freedom, of ancestors who flew back to Africa, of Moses leading the people out of bondage. Little Rose lasted 6 months. 6 months before Master Hawthorne decided she was prime cell age for a plantation that specialized in raising slaves from infancy. He got $500 for her, more than for Josiah, 'cause female babies could be bred when they grew. This time when they came to take her, Lily didn't fight. She just held her daughter close, breathed in her baby's smell one last time and whispered, "You going to be strong, you hear me? You got warrior blood in you from your grandmama Rose from me, from all the women who came before. Don't never forget that." They pulled Rose from her arms, and the baby cried. Oh, how she cried, reaching back, not understanding why her mama wasn't coming too. Lily stood there like a statue, her face carved from stone, her eyes dry as dust. But inside, something was dying. Or maybe it was finally being born. That cold rage that would one day set ironwood aflame. She took another 25 lashes that day. Not for resisting, she hadn't. But just 'cause Cyrus Boone enjoyed it. Enjoyed seeing this strong woman finally seeming to break. He didn't understand that she wasn't breaking, she was forging. Every lash was tempering her like steel and fire, making her harder, sharper, more dangerous. The third baby came in 1868, another girl born in the summer heat that pressed down like a physical weight, making breathing feel like work. This time, Lily didn't name her right away, didn't want to attach a name to something she knew she'd lose. But Mama D insisted, "You got to name her child. Even if she's here for just a little while, she deserves to be known." So Lily named her Grace, Grace. 'Cause that's what she needed, divine grace to survive this hell, grace to keep going when every fiber of her being wanted to just lay down and die. She nursed Grace in secret in the darkest corner of her cabin, away from windows where white eyes might see and start calculating profit. She sang to her in whispers, taught her little games with her fingers, tried to pack a lifetime of love into however many days or weeks or months she'd be allowed. 3 months. That's all she got. 3 months before Master Hawthorne received an offer he couldn't refuse. $600 from a plantation in Alabama that had lost several slave infants to illness and needed to replenish their stock. But this time, Lily had made plans. The old ones had helped her prepare a hiding place deep in the woods in a hollow tree near the Hush Harbor. When she heard Hawthorne was coming to inspect the baby, music, she wrapped Grace tight and ran. She made it as far as the edge of the cotton fields before the paddy roller's dogs caught her scent. Them hounds, trained to track runaway slaves, came tearing through the rows, their baying like demon calls. Behind them came Cyrus Boone and 2 other overseers on horseback. They cornered her at the whipping post. How's that for cruel irony? The very place of her suffering became the place of her greatest loss. "Give me that baby," Boone demanded, his hand already reaching out. Lily held Grace tighter, the baby whimpering against her chest, somehow sensing the danger. "Please," she begged, and folks say it was the only time anyone ever heard Lily beg. "Please, just let me keep this one, just this one. I'll do anything. Work till I die, take any punishment, anything. Just let me keep my baby." Master Hawthorne rode up then, his face cold as winter frost. "You think your wants matter more than my profit? You think motherhood gives you rights? Your property, girl. That baby's property. And I'll dispose of my property as I see fit." He nodded to Boone, who wrenched Grace from Lily's arms with such force that she heard her own shoulder pop. The baby music screamed, a sound that would haunt Lily for the rest of her life. And then she was gone, carried away in Boone's saddlebag like she was merchandise. They didn't even wait to sell her proper. Music just handed her to the Alabama trader right there in the middle of the quarters, exchanged money for flesh while Lily watched her body gone numb with shock and grief. "Tie her up," Hawthorne ordered. 100 lashes, 50 for running and 50 more so she'll remember what happens when she tries to hide what belongs to me. It took 4 men to drag Lily to the post because suddenly she was fighting again. Scratching, biting, kicking, screaming words that music wasn't in no language anyone recognized. Maybe African, maybe something deeper. Music, the language of pure maternal anguish. They tied her so tight her wrists bled. They ripped her dress down to expose her back. That back already heavy with scars from previous punishments. A map of her suffering. Music, a testament to her resistance. The whip came down. 1 and 2, 3, on and on. The count went up like a prayer to a cruel god. Blood flowed thick and hot down her legs, music soaking into the Georgia clay that had drunk so much of her people's blood over the years. Music. Somewhere around the 75th lash, Lily did something that shocked even the hardened overseers. She bit down on her own tongue sound. Music bit clean through part of it so she wouldn't scream, wouldn't give them the satisfaction of hearing her pain. Blood poured from her mouth mixing with the blood from her back, and still she made no sound. At the 83rd lash, she passed out. They threw water on her to wake her up, then music continued. 90, 95, 100. When they finally cut her down, she collapsed like a broken doll. The other enslaved folks, forced to watch as always, rushed forward to catch her. Mama D, ancient and bent but still moving, cradled Lily's head in her lap. "Child," music, she whispered, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. "Child, you got to let go. You got to stop loving, stop hoping, 'cause they just going to keep taking from you." But Lily's eyes, though swollen and pain-laced, still held that fire. She whispered through her bitten tongue, blood bubbling on her lips. "No, I'll never stop loving. I'll never stop hoping, but I will stop forgiving. And I will start counting. Every lash, every stolen child, every broken promise, I'm counting it all." They carried her back to the quarters, laid her on her stomach because her back was too torn up to touch. For 3 days she hovered between life and death, fever raging through her body, infections spreading from her wounds. Sister Ruth tended her with puces and prayers. Mama D performed rootwork ceremonies, burning sage and whispering incantations. The whole quarters prayed. Christian prayers and African prayers mixed together, begging whatever gods were listening to spare this woman who'd already suffered so much. On the 4th day, Lily's fever broke. She opened them in eyes and spoke her first words. "How many?" "How many what, child?" Mama D asked. "How many lashes total?" "For all 3 times?" "For all 3 babies." Mama D counted on her fingers, old memory sharp as ever. "Let's see. 50 for the first, 25 for the second, 100 for the third. That's 175. Lily finished. Her voice was flat, mechanical, like she was reciting mathematics. 175 lashes for 3 stolen children. I'll remember. I'll add every single one to the count. And in that moment, child, something inside Lily died completely. And something far more dangerous was born. The woman who loved had become the woman who counted, and the whip that had tried to break her was forging her into a weapon. She just didn't know how to use it yet. But the ancestors, the ancestors were watching, and they were waiting. The reckoning was coming. It was just a matter of time. Now you see, people, we come to the year of our Lord, 1869, when Lily was 24 summers old, and her back was already a testament to suffering. 175 scars woven into her flesh like some devil's tapestry. But Master Elias Hawthorne, that cursed one with ice in his veins and greed in his soul, he wasn't satisfied. No, sir. A woman like Lily, strong-willed, defiant-eyed, unbowed despite everything. She was an affront to his authority, a challenge to the very foundation of his power. The trouble started on a Sunday evening in late September, when the air hung heavy with the scent of overripe cotton and come rain. Sundays was supposed to be rest day, the only time enslaved folks had to tend their own small gardens, mend clothes, or gather in the praise house for worship under the watchful eye of a white preacher who made sure Jesus stayed on the Master's side. But Lily had been doing something far more dangerous than resting. She'd been teaching. Listen here. In them days, it was against the law in Georgia for enslaved folks to read or write. The Masters knew what we knew. That literacy was power, that words on a page could be weapons sharper than any blade. That knowledge was the first step on the road to freedom. So they kept us ignorant, deliberatic, kept us bound not just with iron chains, but with chains of enforced stupidity. But Lily, music great God Almighty. She'd learned her letters years ago, taught by an old Quaker woman who used to visit the plantation under pretense of bringing Bibles. But really, she was planting seeds of rebellion. That woman had been run off eventually, threatened with tar and feathers, but not before she'd passed her knowledge to a handful of slaves, including young Lily. For years, Lily kept this knowledge hidden, knowing the price of discovery. But after losing her 3 babies, after counting them 175 lashes, Something in her shifted. What was the point of playing it safe? What was the point of surviving if you wasn't really living? So, she started teaching others in the dead of night, in the hush harbor, deep in the woods, scratching letters in the dirt by moonlight, passing on the gift that white folks considered a crime. She taught Sister Ruth's grandson how to spell his own name, taught a young field hand named Moses, not his real name but the one we gave him because he dreamed of leading folks to freedom, how to read passages from a stolen Bible, taught a woman named Charity the alphabet. Watched her eyes light up as she realized she could decipher the written word, could access knowledge that had been denied her entire life. For 6 months, Lily ran her secret school. They was careful. Lord knows they was careful. Meeting in different spots, keeping watch for paddy rollers, speaking in whispers that barely stirred the night air. But in a place like Ironwood, where the overseer had spies everywhere, where some enslaved folks would betray their own for an extra ration or lighter work, secrets don't keep music long. The betrayer was a man named Silas. Pitiful soul, heavy-hearted from years of Beaton's music that had broke his spirit, if not his body. He told Cyrus Boone about the night, music gatherings, hoping to curry favor, hoping for some small mercy. What he got instead was contempt, but the damage was done. They came for Lily on a Monday morning, just as dawn was breaking red and ominous over the cotton fields. Bad omen if there ever was one. Cyrus Boone kicked in the door of her cabin where she was preparing for another day of carrying water, hauling burdens, enduring. "Caught you," he said with satisfaction dripping from his voice like poison. "Been teaching readin', have you breaking the law?" Filling these awesome heads with dangerous notions. Lily didn't deny it, she just looked him dead in the eye. That look that always unsettled him. That knowing gaze that seemed to see right through to his rotten soul. And said quietly, "Knowledge can't be chained. You can beat me. You can kill me, but you can't kill what I already planted." Lord have mercy. The rage that came over Boone's face was something terrible to behold. He grabbed Lily by her hair and dragged her out into the quarters common area where the other enslaved folks was just wakin', preparing for another day of endless toil. Master Hawthorne was already there, seated on his black stallion like some pale horseman of the apocalypse. He'd brought a new whip with him, special ordered from Charleston, made of braided leather, music with bits of metal and glass woven in to tear flesh more efficient. 100 lashes, he announced, his voice cold and final as a death sentence. 50 for teaching illegal literacy, and 50 more for corrupting my property with ideas above their station. They stripped Lily's dress down to her waist and tied her to the whipping post. That cursed tree that had drunk so much of our people's blood it seemed to lean towards suffering like a plant leans towards sun. Her back, already scarred heavy with 175 marks, was about to be written on again. The first lash came down with a crack like thunder. Lily's body jerked, but she made no sound. The second followed, then the third. Each one lay in a new stripe of fire across old wounds. By the 10th, blood was flowing free, dripping down to soak her skirt, puddle on the ground. Cyrus Boone wielded that whip with something like pleasure. You could see it in his eyes, that sick satisfaction of a weak man given power over the strong. 20 lashes, 30, 40. Somewhere around the 45th, Lily started singing, soft at first, then stronger. A spiritual that rose from her torn throat like a bird taking flight from a burning tree. Wade in the water, children, wade in the water. God's going to trouble the water. The other enslaved folks, forced to watch this brutality as they always was, picked up the song. Voices joined voices, creating a chorus that rang across Ironwood Plantation like a proclamation. Sister Ruth sang, Moses sang. Even old Mama D bent and ancient lifted her cracked voice to the sky. "Shut up," Boone roared. "All of you shut your mouths." But they didn't. The song grew louder, more insistent, turning punishment into testimony, turning suffering into resistance. And Lily, sweet Jesus, she kept counting under her breath between verses. 46, 47, 48. By the 60th lash, her back was hamburger meat, barely recognizable as human flesh. By the 70th, even Boone was breathing hard from the exertion, his arm tying. By the 80th, music, Lily had stopped singing, but was still counting, her voice a whisper. 81, 82, 83. Master Hawthorne called out from his horse. "Make sure she remembers this. Make sure every slave on this plantation understands the price of defiance." 90 lashes, 95, 100. When they finally cut her down, Lily didn't collapse like they expected. She stood, swayed, but music stood. Her legs somehow still holding her weight. Blood ran down her back in rivers, soaked through her clothes, dripped onto the red Georgia clay, but she turned to face Master Hawthorne. Music. And in her eyes was something that made even that cold-hearted devil shift uncomfortable in his saddle. 275, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. That's the count now. 275 lashes. I ain't forgot the 175 from my babies, and I ain't going to forget these 100 neither. I'm keeping a ledger, Master. Music. Just like you keep ledgers of your cotton and your profits, I'm keeping a ledger written in blood and pain. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day, account's going to be settled. Hawthorne's face went pale, then red with fury. Get her out of my sight before I have her whipped again. They carried Lily back to the quarters, her body leaving a trail of blood behind her. Mama D and Sister, Music Ruth, tended her wounds with their rootwork remedies. Puces of comfrey and plantain, salves mixed with whiskey and prayers. For Music, 5 days, Lily burned with fever, her body fighting infection, her spirit wandering in that space between life and death where the ancestors dwell. In her fever dreams, she saw her Mama Rose standing in a field of blood-red flowers. She saw Josiah reaching out to her from across a great distance. She saw her 3 babies, little Josiah, Rose, and Grace, playing together in some place beyond pain, beyond bondage, beyond this cruel world. And she saw something else, a vision of herself standing in flames, holding a whip in her own hand while Ironwood Plantation burned behind her. When the fever finally broke on the 6th day, Lily opened her eyes and spoke. I ain't dying yet, got too much counting left to do. That night, as she lay on her stomach, 'cause her back was too torn to touch, she whispered to the darkness. One day I going to carry something different, not water buckets, not burdens. One day I going to carry justice itself. And this whole God-forsaken place going to know my name, Lily Duh White, the woman who counted every lash and made them all count for something. Listen close now, child, 'cause this part of the tale is where everything started changing. Where Lily's eyes, already opened wide since birth, began to see even deeper truths about the world she was trapped in. In them days of deep sorrow, words had power that the masters understood all too well. That's why they kept the Bible locked away from us, only letting white preachers read selected verses about slaves obeying their masters, about being content with our lot, about rewards waiting in heaven for the meek and suffering. But the book said other things too, dangerous things, liberating things. It was the spring of 1870, and Lily was healing slow from them 100 lashes. Her back was a landscape of raised scars, some still pink and angry, others faded to silvery white. A map of 275 moments of agony that she'd cataloged and stored away in her memory like treasures or weapons. She was still carrying water, always carrying water that had become her identity, her purpose, her way of moving through the plantation without raising too much suspicion. But now when she walked them paths between creek and field, between quarters and big house, her eyes was always searching, always looking for something she couldn't quite name. The discovery came on a Tuesday afternoon when a storm rolled in, sudden and fierce. One of them, spring tempest, that turns the sky green and makes the air smell like pennies in fear. Lily was caught between the creek and the quarters when the rain started falling in sheets. So she ducked into the old tobacco barn that hadn't been used in years, not since Master Hawthorne switched his whole operation to cotton. Inside, the barn was dark and musty, full of forgotten equipment and rotten wood. Lily shook the rain from her clothes and waited, listening to thunder roll across the sky like God clear in his throat. That's when she saw it. A glint of something in the corner, partially buried under moldy burlap sacks. She approached, careful-like, moving aside the debris, and there it was, a Bible. Not a new one like Master Hawthorne kept in his study, but old and water-damaged, its leather cover cracking, pages swollen and stuck together. Someone had hidden it here years ago, maybe another enslaved person, maybe even that old Quaker woman who taught Lily her letters before being run off. Great God in heaven. Lily's hands trembled as she picked up that book. Just holding it was a crime punishable by whipping, maybe music worse. But she couldn't put it down. She opened it careful, and despite the water damage, many Clear's throat pages was still readable. She started with Genesis, sounding out words she barely remembered. Her finger tracing lines about creation, about humanity made in God's image, all humanity, music, not just white folks. Then she turned to Exodus, and there it was, the story of Moses, leading his people out of bondage, out of slavery in Egypt, toward the promised land. "Let my people go," she whispered, reading the words God spoke to Pharaoh through Moses. "Let my people go." Her heart was beating like African drums in her chest. This was the same book that white preachers used to tell us to accept our chains, to obey our masters, to wait for freedom in the next life. But here, Lord have mercy, here was a God who freed slaves, who struck down oppressors, who parted seas and led the captive to liberation. Lily stayed in that barn long after the rain stopped, reading by the dim light that filtered through cracks in the walls. She read about David slaying Goliath, a small shepherd boy defeating a giant warrior. Music. She read about Esther, a woman who saved her people from destruction. She read Psalms about God delivering the righteous from the hands of the wicked. And then she read something that made her stop cold, made her read the passage 3 times to make sure she understood. The righteous, music cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles, all their troubles. Not some, not eventually, maybe in heaven, but delivers music them, present tense, active here and now. Sister Ruth found her there at dusk, still clutching that damaged music Bible like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Child, what you doing in here?" Folks been worried. She stopped when she saw the book. Music. "Sweet Jesus, where'd you get that?" "Found it," Lily said simply. "And sister?" Music. "Ruth, it don't say what they tell us. It says it don't say we supposed to accept bondage. It says the opposite. It says God frees the captive, delivers the oppressed, strikes down tyrants." The older woman's eyes filled with tears, tears of recognition, of remembering truth she'd once known, but had let be beaten out of her over the years. "I know, baby. I know. But knowing that truth just makes the chains heavier, don't it?" "No," Lily said with conviction that surprised even herself. "Knowing that truth makes the chains weaker, 'cause now I know they ain't from God, they from men. And what men make, men can break." From that day forward, Lily became obsessed with that hidden Bible. She couldn't keep it in her cabin. Too dangerous, too easily discovered during the random searches that Cyrus Boone liked to conduct. So she kept it in the barn, wrapped carefully in oilcloth she'd stolen from the supply shed, and visited it whenever she could slip away unnoticed. She memorized passages, burning them into her brain like brands. She learned that Jesus himself had said, "I have come to proclaim freedom for the prisoners and recovery of sight for the blind, to set the oppressed free." She learned that the prophets had railed against injustice, against the rich oppressing the poor, against the powerful crushing the weak. The more she read, the angrier she became. But it wasn't the hot, explosive anger of her youth. This was something colder, more focused. This was righteous fury tempered by divine validation. She'd always felt that slavery was wrong, but now she had proof from the same book the masters used to justify it. Old folks say that knowledge is power, but sometimes knowledge is also burden. 'Cause once you know the truth, you can't unknow it. Once you understand that your oppression ain't ordained by God, but is actually an abomination to Him, you can't just bow your head and accept it no more. Lily started sharing what she learned. Careful, like in whispers during water breaks in the fields, in coded spirituals sung in the praise house, in midnight gatherings in the hush harbor. She'd quote scripture, real scripture, not the cherry-picked verses the white preacher used, and watch as understanding dawned in people's eyes. Exodus 21 says, "If a master strikes his slave and the slave dies, the master shall be punished," she'd whisper. Galatians says there's neither slave nor free in Christ Jesus. Isaiah says to loose the chains of injustice and set the oppressed free. Moses, that young field hand who dreamed of freedom, became her most devoted student. "You open in my eyes," he told her one night. "All this time I thought God wanted us in chains, but He don't. White folks want us in chains, and they using God's name to justify they evil." "Exactly," Lily replied. "The word can be a chain or it can be a machete. Depends on who's wielding it and for what purpose. But secrets, as I said before, don't keep long." On a plantation there was always someone watching, always someone listening, always someone willing to trade information for favor. It was Silas again, that broken-spirited man who'd betrayed the literacy classes who told Cyrus Boone about Lily's Bible study sessions. Maybe he thought he'd earn more mercy this time. Maybe he was just too beaten down to understand he was betraying his own people. Whatever his reasons, the result was the same. Discovery, exposure, punishment. Boone came with 3 other overseers to search the tobacco barn. They found the Bible hidden under its oilcloth, found Lily's name scratched into the inside cover in her own careful hand, evidence of her crime, her defiance, her refusal to stay ignorant and compliant. They brought her and the book before Master Hawthorne in the yard of the big house. He stood on his white columned porch, looking down at her like she was something less than human, something vile and contemptible. "You've been reading this?" he asked, holding up the damaged Bible between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. "Yes, sir," Lily replied. No point in lying, no point in begging. She'd walked this path before, and corrupting others with your interpretations. Music. Ain't my interpretation, sir. Just reading what's written there. Hawthorne's face flushed red. You think you can understand God's word better than educated white men? Better than ordained preachers? Lily met his eyes. That look again. That knowing gaze that always unsettled him. I think God's word speaks for itself. Don't need no white man to tell me what let my people go means. Don't need no education to understand. Set the captives, music free, Lord of glory. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut with a knife. Even the birds seemed to stop singing. The wind seemed to hold its breath, waiting for what would come next. Master Hawthorne descended the porch steps slowly, deliberate, still clutching that Bible. He walked right up to Lily, close enough that she could smell the whiskey on his breath and the hatred in his soul. You know what the punishment music for this is? He asked quietly, and quiet from him was more terrifying than shouting. I can guess, Lily replied, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. 200 lashes, Hawthorne said, 100 for possessing forbidden material, and another 100 for spreading heretical interpretations. 200 added to the 275 she already counted. That would make 475, almost halfway to 600, almost halfway to whatever destiny was waiting for her at the end of this brutal arithmetic. They tied her to the whipping post right there in the yard where she could see the big house with its white columns and false righteousness, where the master's wife and daughters could watch from behind lace curtains. If they chose where the other enslaved folks gathered once again to witness, could learn their lesson about the price of seeking knowledge, seeking truth, seeking freedom. Before the first lash fell, Master Hawthorne did something he'd never done before. He opened that damaged Bible to a random page and read aloud, Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. Then he closed the book, handed it to Cyrus Boone, and said, Burn it. They built a small fire right there, fed that Bible to the flames while Lily watched while 200 lashes were laid across her back. Each one counted aloud by Boone like he was reading scripture himself. 198. 109. 200. But what they didn't understand, what they could never understand, was that you can burn paper, but you can't burn words once they've been planted in a mind. You can destroy the book, but you can't destroy what's been memorized, internalized, weaponized. As the whip tore her flesh and the Bible turned to ash, Lily whispered through bloody lips, The Word became flesh. The Word became flesh, and the Word lives on. When it was over, when they cut her down and she fell to her knees in the dirt, she lifted her face to the sky and declared, 475, I'm keeping count. The book says, the book I read before you burned it. The book says that what's done in darkness will be brought to light. The book says the oppressor will fall and the captive will be free. You can burn pages, but you can't burn truth. And truth, Master Hawthorne, is coming for you like fire. Now you see, people, we come to the year 1871 when whispers of freedom was blowing through the South like wind through cotton fields. The war between North and South had ended 6 years prior, and though we'd been declared free on paper, in places like Ironwood Plantation, deep in the Georgia backwoods, where law moved slow as molasses and white men's will moved fast as lightning, slavery continued under different names. Sharecropping, they called it, debt, pawnage, forced labor. But chains is chains, no matter what fancy words you dress them in. Lily was 26 now, her back carrying 475 scars, her heart carrying more weight than flesh could bear. But something had shifted in the quarters. You could feel it in the air like electricity before a storm. News traveled through the slave grapevine about black folks up north voting, owning land, living free. About Reconstruction governments trying to enforce the new laws. About federal troops, music stationed in some southern cities to protect the newly freed. Old folks say that hope is the most dangerous thing you can give enslaved people. It makes them restless, makes them dream, makes them willing to risk everything for a chance at something better. Moses, that young field hand who'd learned to read from Lily, who'd memorized them Bible verses about liberation, he was the one who first spoke it aloud. It was a Sunday evening in the Hush Harbor, that secret place deep in the swamp where we gathered to worship without white supervision, where our prayers could be honest and our songs could be seditious. "We should run," Moses said, his voice low but intense. "All of us together. They can't stop all of us if we go at music once." Sister Ruth gasped. "Boy, hush your mouth. You talking about mass escape? That's revolt talk. That's death talk. Music." "We already dying," Moses countered. "Dying slow one day at a time. At least this way we'd be dying for something." Lily sat quiet in the shadows, listening. She'd been thinking the same thoughts, turning them over in her mind like stones in a river, polishing them smooth with contemplation. Around her, other voices joined the conversation, some fearful, some excited, all desperate. Music. "How we going to get past the paddy rollers?" asked a young woman named Dina. "They got dogs, guns, horses, we on foot with nothing but the clothes on our backs." "We go at night," said another voice. "Follow the North Star like them old ones did on the Underground Railroad." "Master Hawthorne will hunt us down," Sister Ruth warned. "He'll hire every slave catcher from here to Alabama. He'll make an example." "Let him try," Moses interrupted. "Music. His youthful fire burning bright. We outnumber them. There's maybe 10 white men on this whole plantation, master, overseers, drivers. We's over 70. If we rise up together, that's rebellion." Mama D spoke up, her ancient voice cracking but clear. "That's Nat Turner talk. Music, that's Denmark Vesey talk, and we all know how them stories ended with black bodies swinging from trees." Great God in heaven. The debate went on for hours, voices rising and falling like waves, hope and fear battling music for dominance. Finally, all eyes turned to Lily. She'd become something of a leader in the quarters, not by seeking it, but by surviving it, by standing tall when others was beaten down, by keeping her fire lit when others had been extinguished. "What you think, Lily?" Moses asked. "You the strongest among us, you the one who counts every lash, who reads the scripture, who ain't never broke. We'll follow your lead." Lily stood up slow, her scarred back aching in the humid night air. She looked around at the faces gathering close, young and old, field hands and house servants, the hopeful and the terrified, and she felt the weight of their futures pressing down on her shoulders, heavier than any water bucket. "I think," she said carefully, "that freedom ain't given, it's taken. I think that every day we stay here, we die in a little more. I think that if we got a chance, even a small chance, we got to take it." The words hung in the air like smoke. Sister Ruth started crying. Mama D closed her eyes and began praying in that old African tongue she sometimes spoke. Moses grinned, fierce and determined. "Then we music do it," he said. "We plan it proper. We choose a night and we run." Over the next 3 weeks, they plotted in whispers and shadows. They gathered supplies, dried corn stolen from the storehouse, strips of salted pork, candles, matches. They studied the paddy roller schedules, noted when Cyrus Boone drank himself to sleep, memorized the paths through the swamp where dogs couldn't track. They agreed on a signal, 3 owl hoots from the edge of the quarters and a destination, the federal garrison in Atlanta, 200 miles north. Lily felt alive in a way she hadn't since Josiah was sold away. She was doing something, fighting back, not just enduring, but resisting. At night, she'd touch the scars on her back and whisper 475 lashes. "Soon, I'ma make them count for something. Soon, I'ma turn all this pain into power." The chosen night was August 15th, when the moon would be dark and the master would be away in Savannah on business. Everything was ready. 70 souls prepared to run toward freedom or die trying. But there's always a Judas, ain't there? Always someone whose spirit is so broke that they'd rather betray than believe. His name was Jacob. Not the same Silas who'd betrayed before, but another broken soul. He'd been whipped so many times his back looked like plowed earth. And somewhere in all that suffering, his mind had twisted itself into knots. He convinced himself that escaping was impossible, that resistance was futile, that the only way to survive was to curry favor with the master. 2 days before the planned escape, Jacob went to Cyrus Boone and told him everything: names, plans, routes. The whole conspiracy laid bare like a sacrifice on an altar of fear. Lord have mercy. The retribution was swift and brutal. On the night of August 13th, while the would-be escapees slept in their cabins, dreaming of freedom, armed overseers surrounded the quarters. They dragged out 23 people, every leader, every planner, everyone whose name Jacob had given up. Lily was among them. They pulled her from sleep, chains already in their hands, and marched all 23 to the yard in front of the big house, where torches burned like hellfire, and Master Hawthorne sat on his horse like judgment itself. "You thought you could conspire against me?" His voice rang out across the night. "You thought you could plot rebellion under my very nose?" Moses stepped forward, his young face defiant even in the face of death. "We ain't your property no more. The law says we free." Hawthorne laughed, a sound like cracking bones. "The law says what I say it says on my land, and my law says you hang." They erected noose right there, fashioned from the same rope used to tie cotton bales, twisted into instruments of death. Lily watched, music, as they placed the ropes around the necks of her friends, her fellow conspirators, her brothers and sisters in bondage and resistance. One by one, they were hanged. Moses went first, still shouting scripture. "Let my people go, let my people." The trapdoor, music dropped, his voice cut off, his body swung. 15 more followed. Dinah, Abraham, Esther, Ruth's grandson, Samuel. Young ones and old ones, field hands and house servants, all united in death as they tried to be united in flight. Lily was the 20th in line. They placed the noose around her neck, the rough rope scratching against her throat. She could see the bodies of her friends swinging in the torchlight. Could hear Sister Ruth wailing from where the other enslaved folks was forced to watch. Master Hawthorne rode his horse close. "Any last words, Lily? Any more scripture you want to quote? Any more revolution you want to preach?" "Music." Lily looked him dead in the eye, that look that had always unsettled him, that knowing gaze that seemed to see his very soul. And she spoke clear and strong. "You can hang my body, but you can't hang my spirit. You can kill me, but you can't kill the idea of freedom. It's already planted, it's already growing. And one day, Master Hawthorne, it go bear fruit that'll choke you like a vine." His face went purple with rage. "Drop her!" The trapdoor opened beneath Lily's feet. She fell. The rope tightened and held, but didn't break her neck. Didn't kill her quick and merciful. Just strangled her slow, cutting off her air, her vision darkening, her lungs screaming for breath she couldn't draw. She hung there suffering, dying, while Master Hawthorne watched with satisfaction. But then, sweet Jesus, then something happened that folks still talk about to this day. The rope frayed, the old hemp, maybe weakened by weather, maybe blessed by ancestors, maybe touched by God himself. It frayed and snapped. Lily crashed to the ground, gasping, alive. There was silence, absolute deathly quiet as everyone processed what had just happened. In all the years of lynchings and hang-ins, nobody had ever seen a rope break. It was an omen, a sign, a miracle, or a curse, dependent on who you asked. Even Master Hawthorne seemed shaken. He stared at Lily's collapsed form, at the broken rope dangling from the gallows, at the bodies of the 15 already dead. "Cut her down," he finally said, his voice strange and uncertain. "Put her in chains. She lives, but not free. She lives as an example." They dragged Lily back to the quarters, alive, but barely. Mama D tended her, massaged her bruised throat, whispered prayers of thanks and terror mixed together. "Child," the old woman said, tears streaming down her ancient face, "you were supposed to die tonight. That rope was supposed to kill you, but something, God or the ancestors or fate itself, said, 'Not yet.'" Lily's voice was a raspy whisper, her throat crushed but not destroyed. "Still not my time, Mama D. Still got counting to do. Still got a reckoning to bring. I heard my grandmother's voice while I was hanging there. She said, 'Not yet, daughter, not yet. Your purpose ain't finished.' So I'm still here, still breathing, still waiting for the moment when all this suffering turns into something else, turns into justice, turns into vengeance, turns into freedom for all of us. Listen here, child. Gather around close now, because what I's about to tell you is the darkest chapter in this already dark tale. This is where the devil himself seemed to take residence at Ironwood Plantation, where cruelty reached heights that even them hardened by years of suffering could barely comprehend. This is the story of the day Master Elias Hawthorne decided to break Lily once and for all, or die trying. It was the winter of 1872, 6 months after the failed escape attempt, 6 months after Lily hung from that rope and lived. In the months, she'd become something more than a woman in the eyes of both the enslaved and the enslavers. To us in the quarters, she was touched by the ancestors, protected by powers beyond understanding. To the white folks, she was unnatural, cursed, a constant reminder that some spirits can't be broken no matter how hard you try. Master Hawthorne couldn't tolerate it. Every time he saw Lily carrying her water buckets with that straight back and them knowing eyes, every time she looked at him without dropping her gaze in proper submission, it ate at him like acid. He'd already given her 475 lashes. He'd already tried to hang her. What was left? The answer came to him like a revelation from his own private hell. He'd break her publicly, spectacularly, in a display of power so overwhelming that it would crush not just Lily's spirit, but the hope of every enslaved person who dared to see her as a symbol of resistance. On a gray February morning, when frost still clung to the cotton stalks like death's fingers, Cyrus Boone came to the quarters with 5 other overseers, all armed, all grim-faced. They didn't grab Lily gentle. They dragged her from her cabin while she was still in her nightclothes, pulled her through the mud and cold to the whipping post in the center of the plantation. But this time, they didn't just tie her to the post. They built a platform, music around it, raised it up so everyone on the plantation could see from any angle. They erected poles with hooks and stretched Lily's arms out wide, music crucifixion style, her toes barely touching the wooden planks beneath her. Master Hawthorne rode up on his black stallion as the sun was rising, blood red over the horizon. Bad omen if there ever was one. Behind him came every enslaved person on Ironwood, 70 souls forced to witness what was coming, forced to watch and learn the price, music of defiance. 300 lashes, Hawthorne announced, his voice cold as the February air. Not for any particular crime. She's committed, music too many to count. But as a lesson, as a reminder, as a statement that I am master here and my will is law. Sweet Jesus, 300 lashes added to the 475 already on her back. That would make 775 total, more than most people received in a lifetime of bondage, more than most bodies could survive. Sister Ruth fell to her knees weeping. Mama D, now so ancient she could barely stand, began praying aloud in that African tongue, her voice rising like an incantation. Young children clung to their mothers, not fully understanding but feeling the wrongness in the air. They stripped Lily's back bare. Her shirt fell away to reveal that landscape of scars, raised welts, crisscrossed lines, patches of skin that had been torn and healed so many times it barely looked human anymore. Her back was a testament, a diary written in pain, a map of suffering that stretched from shoulders to waist. Cyrus Boone stepped up with a new whip specially made for this occasion. Thicker than usual, with 9 braided leather tails, each embedded with small pieces of metal. A cat of 9 tails, they called it, designed to tear maximum flesh with minimum effort. The first lash came down with a sound like thunder cracking the sky. Lily's body jerked, but she made no sound. The second followed, then the third, each one laying new stripes across old scars, tearing skin that had barely healed, opening wounds on top of wounds. By the 10th lash, blood was flowing free, running down her legs, dripping onto the platform beneath her feet. By the 20th, her back looked like raw meat, barely recognizable as human flesh. By the 30th, even some of the overseers was looking away, uncomfortable with the level of brutality they was witnessing. But Lily, great God Almighty, she counted. Through the pain, through the blood, through the darkness threatening to swallow her consciousness, she counted 31, 32, 33. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence that had fallen over the plantation, everyone could hear her. That quiet counting became a rhythm, a heartbeat, a defiant proclamation that even in the midst of unspeakable agony, her mind was still her own. 50 lashes, 75, 100. Cyrus Boone's arm was tiring, so another overseer stepped up to take his place. Fresh arm, fresh enthusiasm for cruelty. The whip continued its devil's work. Somewhere around the 120th lash, Lily started singing. Not loud, not strong, but clear enough to hear. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. Other voices in the forced audience joined in. Quiet at first, then stronger. Sister Ruth sang, Mama D sang. Even some who'd been too scared to resist before found their voices and lifted them in solidarity. Master Hawthorne roared, Silence, all of you, shut your mouths or you'll join her. But the singing didn't stop, it grew. It swelled. It became a chorus that rang across Ironwood Plantation like a battle cry disguised as a hymn. And underneath it all, Lily kept counting. 147. 149. By the 200th lash, Lily's back was barely there anymore, just exposed muscle and bone, blood and torn flesh. Her body hung limp from the restraints, held up only by the ropes. Music. Her consciousness drifted in and out, her mind seeking refuge in that place where the ancestors dwelt. Music. In her delirium, she saw visions. She saw her Mama Rose standing in a field of fire, smiling sad and proud. She saw Josiah reaching out to her from across a great chasm. She saw her 3 babies, little Josiah, Rose, and Grace, grown to adulthood in some impossible future, free and beautiful and whole. And she saw something else herself, standing in the ruins of Ironwood, holding a whip in her own hand, while Master Hawthorne knelt before her, begging for mercy he'd never shown. The vision gave her strength. She opened her eyes, swollen nearly shut, but still seeing, still knowing, and continued counting aloud. 251, 252, 253. Master Hawthorne watched with satisfaction that slowly turned to unease, then to something close to fear. This woman wouldn't break. After 250 lashes added to 475, music previous, after hanging from a noose that failed to kill her, after losing everything a person could lose, she still wouldn't break. At 287 lashes, Lily's voice finally failed. Not her consciousness that was still there, still present, but her voice gave out, destroyed by the screaming she'd tried to suppress, by the singing she'd used as rebellion, by the mountain that had become her lifeline. She passed out at 291. They threw cold water on her to revive her, but her body wouldn't respond. She hung there, limp and broken, barely breathing. "Keep going," Hawthorne ordered, his voice tight with frustration. "I said 300. Finish it." The overseer looked uncertain. "Sir, she ain't conscious. She might already be. I don't care. Finish it." So they did. The final 9 lashes fell on flesh that couldn't feel anymore, on a body that had shut down everything except the most basic functions of survival. 292, 293, all the way to 300. When they finally cut her down, Lily collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut. Blood pulled beneath her, so much blood that folks wondered how she had any left inside her. Her back was a horror, exposed bone in places, flesh hanging in strips. A brutality so extreme it seemed inhuman to have survived it. Mama D and Sister Ruth rushed forward to catch her before she hit the ground. They carried her back to the quarters, their own bodies shaken with sobs, their minds barely able to process what they'd just witnessed. For 3 days, Lily didn't wake. She lay on her stomach in Mad's cabin, fever raging through her body, infection spreading from her wounds. The old women of the quarters took turns tending her, applying pickuses of comfrey and plantain, bathing her wounds with whiskey and prayers, whispering incantations in languages that predated their capture and transport to this cursed land. On the 3rd night, when everyone thought she'd slip away into death's embrace, when even Mama D was preparing funeral rites, Lily opened her eyes. She stared at the cabin ceiling for a long moment, then spoke, her voice destroyed, barely more than a rasp, but clear in its intention. 775, Mama D leaned close. "What's that, child?" 775 lashes, that's the count now. 475 before, 300 today. 775 marks on my body. 775 reasons for vengeance. 775 debts, too. Music be paid. The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "Baby, you need to let go of that count. You need to heal, not hold on to hate." But Lily shook her head. Barely a movement, but definite. "The countenant is what keeps me alive, Mama D. Every lash is a promise I made to myself. Every scar is a vow I ain't forgot. I survived 301 day because I had to. 'Cause this story ain't over yet. 'Cause somewhere in the future, all this suffering going to mean something." She paused, gathering strength for what she needed to say next. "When I was hanging there, when I was counting past 200, I had another vision, stronger than before, clearer. I saw the end of Ironwood. I saw fire and liberation. I saw the whip in my hand instead of tearing my back. The ancestors showed me my purpose. Mama D, I ain't supposed to die yet. I'm supposed to survive, to count, to remember, and when the time is right, when the number is complete, I'm supposed to bring judgment." Mama D looked at this woman, this impossible, unbreakable, terrifying woman, and whispered, "What number, child? What number is the count supposed to reach?" And Lily, her destroyed voice carrying the weight of prophecy, answered, 600. When I reach 600 lashes, that's when the world changes. That's when accounts get settled. That's when Lily Do Ace White stops being the victim and becomes the judgment. I got 125 more to go. And then Master Hawthorne going to learn what it means to stand on the other side of the whip. Now listen close, child, because this part of the tale is where everything started shifting. Where the hunted started studying the hunter, where the victim started understanding the weapon. Where Lily Do Ace White began her transformation from sufferer to soldier. In them days of deep sorrow, knowledge was power. And the most dangerous knowledge was understanding the very thing that had been used to break you. It was the spring of 1873, a full year after them 300 lashes. Lily had survived what no person should survive, her back now carrying 775 scars like some terrible gospel written in flesh. She was 28 years old, but looked ancient, her body marked by suffering that would have killed most folks 10 times over. Music. But her eyes, sweet Jesus, her eyes still burned with that knowing fire, still held that defiant spark that no amount of weapon could extinguish. And in them eyes a new intelligence was growing, cold and calculating, patient as a snake waiting to strike. The revelation came on an afternoon when Cyrus Boone was drunk, which was most afternoons, truth be music told, that no good man had taken to the bottle heavy after the 300 lashes, haunted by nightmares of Lily's countenant voice, by the way she'd survived what should have killed her, by the growing sense among the enslaved folks that she was protected by powers beyond his understanding. He'd left his whip hanging on a post outside Music, the overseer's cabin, while he stumbled inside to sleep off his whiskey. And Lily, carrying water as always, saw it hanging there like an invitation from fate, Music itself. She looked around careful like nobody was watching. The other overseers was out in the far fields. The plantation was quiet in that heavy afternoon heat when even cruelty takes Music a rest. Lily set down her water buckets and approached that whip like it was a living thing, which in a way it was. It had drunk more of her blood than she cared to remember, had written its message across her back 775 times, had been the instrument of her agony and the tool of her torment. She reached out slow and touched it. The braided leather was worn smooth in places from years of use, rough in others where new sections had been added. The handle was wood, hickory, she guessed, wrapped tight with more leather for grip. The business end, the tails that did the actual tan, was triple braided with small pieces of metal woven throughout. Great God in heaven! As her fingers traced that weapon, something shifted in her understanding. This wasn't some mystical instrument of divine punishment like the masters pretended. This was just a tool. Leather and wood and metal put together by human hands, wielded by human arms, subject to human limitations. She picked it up. It was heavier than she expected. The weight distributed strange, the balance particular. She held it by the handle and felt how it wanted to move, how the momentum of the swing would carry through from shoulder to wrist to leather tails. A memory flashed through her mind. Every time she'd been whipped, every angle of approach, every stance the overseers took, every movement of arm and body that preceded the crack and the pain. She'd been forced to witness hundreds of weapons over the years, had her face pressed to the dirt while others suffered, had stood in line watching friends and family torn apart by this very instrument. Without meaning to, she'd memorized it all, the mechanics, the technique, the physics of cruelty. Lily glanced around again, then stepped into the open space beside the cabin. Her heart was beaten like African drums, her hands shaken. But she raised the whip and tried an experimental swing. It was clumsy, the momentum wrong, the follow rough, awkward. The whip cracked, but without the sharp report she'd heard so many times before. She tried again, better, but still not right. Over the following weeks and months, Lily became obsessed with understanding the whip. Every time she was near one, hanging on a post left in a barn carried by an overseer, she studied it with the intensity of a scholar studying scripture. She noted the length, usually 6 to 8 feet, the weight 2 to 3 wubbies, the number of tails, anywhere from 1 to 9, the materials used, leather, sometimes hemp, metal pieces for extra damage. But more than that, she studied the wielders. She watched how Cyrus Boone stood when he prepared to strike, feet apart, weight on the back foot, shoulders squared. She noted how the younger overseer, a cruel boy named Thomas, used more wrist action and less shoulder, making his strikes faster, but less powerful. She observed how the motion was circular, how the whip needed room to build momentum, how the crack came from the tip, breaking the sound barrier. Old folks say that if you understand your enemy's weapon, music, you understand your enemy. And if you can master that weapon yourself, you transform from victim to victor. In the darkness of her cabin at night, when everyone else was sleeping, Lily practiced. She couldn't risk using an actual whip. Too loud, too suspicious. So, she used rope. She tied a heavy knot at the end to simulate the weight of the leather tails. And in the tiny space of her quarters, music. She worked through the motions over and over, hundreds of times, thousands. Shoulder rotation, wrist snap, follow through. The three elements that made the whip crack, that gave it power. Music, that transformed it from a simple leather cord into an instrument of devastation. Sister Ruth caught her one night, saw her in the dim candlelight, moving through the practiced motions with her rope, her scarred back visible through her thin night shift. "Child, what in God's name you doing?" Lily turned, her face calm. "Learning? Learning what? How to whip yourself?" "No," Lily said, her voice quiet but filled with terrible purpose. "Learning how to whip back." Sister Ruth's eyes went wide with understanding and fear. "That's dangerous talk. That's death talk." "I've been dead," Lily replied, music simply. "Died a little with every lash, with every stolen child, with every moment of this bondage. What's left of me ain't scared no more. What's left is just purpose." She continued her practice, her movements becoming smoother, more confident, more deadly. Sister Ruth watched in silence, torn between wanting to stop this madness, music, and wanting to see where it led. "You really think you can learn to use that devil's tool?" she finally asked. "I already know how it feels to be on the receiving end," Lily said, music cracking her practice rope with increase in precision. 775 times I felt it, every angle, every strength, every weakness. Now I'm just learning the other side, the wielder's music side. And you know what I discovered, Sister Ruth? What's that? The whip ain't as powerful as they make it seem. It's effective. Sure, it tears flesh, causes pain, inspires fear, but it's got limitations. It needs distance to music work. Get too close, and it's useless. It needs space to swing. Corner the wielder, and they can't use it proper. It tires the arm. Even strong men can only whip for so long before their aim gets sloppy. And most important, it's just leather. It can be grabbed, blocked, turned against the person holding it. She demonstrated, snatching her practice rope mid-swing, yanking hard on it. "See, the power flows two ways. They've been using it to control us, but if someone knew how to take it, how to turn it around." Sister Ruth understood what Lily was really saying, what she was really preparing for. "You planning something? Something that's going to get you killed or worse?" "No," Lily said, coiling her practice rope and hiding it under her straw mattress. "I'm planning something that's going to set me free. But not yet. I'm still 25 lashes short of 600, still got some counting to do. But when that number comes, when the ancestors say the time is right, I'll be ready. I'll know everything about the weapon that's been used against me. I'll understand its weight, its balance, its reach, its limitations, and I'll use that knowledge to turn the tables on every devil who ever raised a whip against me or mine." She looked down at her scarred hands, hands that had carried water for 20 years, hands that had been beaten and broken and healed over and over, hands that were now learning a new purpose. "The instrument of pain," she whispered more to herself than to Sister Ruth, "is becoming a weapon of liberation." They gave me 775 reasons to learn this, 775 lessons in how cruelty works, how power operates, how domination functions. They thought they was breaking me, but really they was training me. Every lash was education, every scar was preparation. And when I finally use what they taught me, when I take that whip in my own hands for real, they don't understand the terrible mistake they made. Sister Ruth left that cabin shaken, not sure if she'd just witnessed the birth of a liberator or the making of a monster. But Lily didn't care about such distinctions no more. She just kept practicing in the dark, kept studying in secret, kept preparing for the moment when the weapon would change hands and the student would become the master. Only 25 lashes to go before 600. Only 25 more marks before the prophecy was complete. Only 25 more reasons before justice could finally be served. And every night alone in the darkness, she practiced, waiting, learning, becoming. Great God Almighty. Now we come to the part of this tale that twists the knife already buried deep in Lily's heart. The part where the past reaches forward to grab hold of the present with claws sharper than any overseer's whip. Listen here, people, because what happened in the summer of 1874 would test everything Lily had become, everything she'd survived, everything she'd been preparing for. It was a scorching July afternoon when the wagon rolled up to Ironwood Plantation, one of them fancy carriages from Savannah, pulled by two fine horses driven by a slave trader named Ezekiel Marsh, who was known throughout Georgia as a man who'd sell his own mother if the price was right. Master Hawthorne met him in the yard, and they talked business while Lily was carrying water past, her eyes downcast, but her ears sharp as always. "Got something special for you, Hawthorne," Marsh was saying, his voice oily and self-satisfied. Young mulatto girl about 12 years old. Pretty thing, light-skinned, good teeth, strong constitution, been trained up proper in a house in Charleston. Can sew, can music cook, can read a little, though we don't advertise that part. Lily's heart lurched at the words 12 years old. It had been 6 years since they'd taken baby Grace from her arms. 6 years since that third and final child had been ripped away. Grace would be 6 now, not 12. This couldn't be. But then Marsh opened the back of the wagon and a girl stepped out, tall for her age, skin the color of honey, hair and 2 long braids, wearing a simple gray dress that marked her as house servant stock. She looked around at Ironwood with frightened eyes, taken in the slave quarters, the cotton fields, the whip and post that stood like a monument to suffer in. And when those eyes landed on Lily, sweet Jesus, when their gazes met across that dusty yard, recognition flashed like lightning between them. Not full recognition, not conscious memory, but something deeper, something in the blood, something ancestral. The girl had Josiah's eyes, the first Josiah, Lily's lost music love, the man whose name she'd given to her firstborn son. Those same gentle eyes in a face that was a mirror of what Lily herself must have looked like at that age, before the scars, before the suffering, music, before life had carved her into something harder and more terrible. Lily dropped her water buckets. They hit the ground with a crash that made everyone turn to look at her. Master Hawthorne's face darkened with irritation. But before he could speak, Lily found her voice, destroyed though it was from years of screaming and counting and surviving. "How old did you say she was?" Lily asked, breaking every rule about slaves not speaking unless spoken to, about not questioning white folks' business. Marsh looked at her with surprise and contempt. "None of your concern, girl. But if you must know, she's 12, born in 1862 according to the papers." 1862, the year after Lily's first son was sold away, the year she'd been forced to breed with Samuel, the year another child had come into this world of bondage, but she'd only had 3 children, only 3 babies torn from her arms, little Josiah, Rose, and Grace, unless Lily's mind raced back through the fog of trauma and time, 1862. She'd been sick that year, sick with fever. After what? The memory was hazy, blocked by pain, but pieces started fitting together like a terrible puzzle. She'd been sick after a forced breeding. She'd bled heavy. The old women of the quarters had tended her, had whispered among themselves about the baby that didn't make it, about merciful miscarriage. But what if it hadn't been a miscarriage? What if there had been a 4th child born while Lily was unconscious with fever taken before she even knew to count it among her losses? "What's her name?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a music whisper. Master Hawthorne stepped forward, his hand raised to strike her for her impotence. But something in Lily's face stopped him. Maybe he saw the recognition too. Maybe he understood the cruel opportunity this presented. Her name, Marsh said, consulting his papers, is listed as Sarah, no last name as is customary for property. Previous owner called her Sarah of Charleston, but the girl herself spoke up then, her voice small but clear. "My first mama, the one who nursed me before I got sold to the Charleston house. She called me by a different name. She called me Hope." Hope. The word hung in the air like a prayer or a curse, dependent on how you looked at it. Lily felt her knees go weak, felt the world tilt sideways. A 4th child, a daughter she'd never known she had. Piece of herself walking around in the world that she'd never counted among her losses, never mourned among her griefs. Master Hawthorne's eyes gleamed with sudden understanding and malicious pleasure. He looked between Lily and the girl, seeing the resemblance now, seeing the connection, seeing the perfect tool for breaking the woman who'd refused to be broken by 775 lashes. Well, he said slowly. "Seems like we got ourselves a family reunion. Leah, this here is Sarah. I just bought her to work in my house. She'll be sleeping in the servant quarters attached to the big house. You'll see her every day, probably pass her in the yard, watch her carry my wife's sewing, hear her voice through the windows, but you won't speak to her, you won't acknowledge her, you won't even look at her directly. That's my rule. Break it and she pays the price. Lord have mercy. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. Not just owning Lily's daughter, but dangling her like bait, keeping her close but forever out of reach, turning her presence into another form of torture. Lily looked at the girl, at Hope, at Sarah, at this child she'd unknowingly carried and lost, and saw her own reflection staring back, saw potential, saw innocence, saw everything that slavery sought to destroy. And she understood immediately what Master Hawthorne was doing. He was using this child as a hostage, as insurance against Lily's resistance, as the final chain that would bind her more effectively than any iron shackle. "Do you understand, Lily?" Hawthorne pressed. "This girl's fate is tied to your behavior now. You step out of line, she gets whipped. You try to run, she gets sold downriver to the worst plantation I can find. You raise your hand against me or mine, she gets branded. She's your weakness now, and I own it." The girl, Hope Sarah, looked between the adults with growing fear, not fully understanding, but sensing that she'd become a pawn in some terrible game. Her eyes found Lily's again, and this time there was a question in them. "Who are you? Why do you look at me like that? Why does your face carry such pain?" Lily wanted to run to her, wanted to wrap her arms around this child and never let go, wanted to tell her everything about her real name, her true heritage, the love that had been stolen before it could even form. But she couldn't. Hawthorne's threat hung in the air like an executioner's blade, and Lily knew he wasn't bluffing. He'd hurt this child to hurt her, would destroy hope to break Lily's spirit. So instead, Lily did the music hardest thing she'd ever done. Harder than surviving 775 lashes. Harder than counting through the pain, harder than watching her first 3 babies be sold away. She looked at her daughter, memorized every feature of that young face, and then dropped her gaze to the ground in feigned submission. "I understand, Master," she said, her destroyed voice flat and empty. "Good," Hawthorne replied with satisfaction. "Take the girl inside, Mrs. Hawthorne. Show her what her duties will be. As for you, Lily, get back to your water carrying. And remember, I'm watching, always watching." Lily picked up her fallen buckets and walked away, every step feeling like walking through deep water, every breath feeling like breathing ground glass. Behind her, she heard Hope Sarah being led into the big house, heard the door close, heard her own music heart breaking into pieces too small to count. That night in the quarters, Mama D found Lily sitting in the dark, staring at nothing, her face wet with silent tears. "I saw her," the old woman said gently. "I saw the resemblance." "That's your child, ain't it? The one we thought was lost to fever." Lily nodded, unable to speak, and now Hawthorne got her right where he can use her against you. Another nod. Mama D sat down beside Lily, her ancient bones creaking, and took the younger woman's scarred hand in her own weathered one. "So what you going to do, child? All that preparing, all that learning about the whip, all that counting toward 600? Is this going to stop you?" Lily was quiet for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was different. Harder, colder, more dangerous than Mama D had ever heard it. "No, this don't stop nothing. If anything, it makes it more urgent. 'Cause now, I ain't just fighting for myself, for my own freedom, for my own revenge. Now I'm fighting for her, for hope, for the chance that she might grow up in a world where no master can use children as weapons, where no mother has to watch her babies be sold or threatened or destroyed." She turned to look at Mama D, and in her eyes was something that made even that ancient woman shiver. "I'm still 25 lashes short of 600, still got some counting to do. But when that number comes, when the prophecy is complete, I ain't just taking my freedom. I'm taking hers too. I'm burning this whole goddamn plantation to the ground, and I'm walking out of the ashes with my daughter beside me. That's the new promise. That's the new plan." She stood up, her scarred back straight despite the weight of 775 lashes and one impossible new burden. Master Hawthorne thought he was putting a knife to my throat by bringing that girl here, but what he really did was give me one more reason, the best reason, to do what I've been preparing for. He put my weakness right in front of me. But weakness can become strength if you know how to transform it. And I've been transforming pain into power for 29 years now. What's one more transformation? I just need 25 more lashes, 25 more marks, 25 more reasons, And then the master going to learn that the greatest mistake a man can make is giving a mother something to fight for. Listen close now, child, because we come to the moment when heaven and earth seem to hold their breath. When the very sky darkened with judgment, when nature herself appeared to take sides in the battle between oppressor and oppressed. It was late August of 1874, just weeks after Hope Sarah had arrived at Ironwood, and the air hung heavy with more than just humidity. It carried the weight of come reckoning. The sign started early that morning. Old Mama D woke from troubled dreams. Her ancient face creased with worry. "The ancestors is stirring," she told anyone who'd listen. "They restless, something big coming, and it ain't going to be gentle." The sky at dawn was the color of old bruises, purple and yellow and sickly green. Birds flew in confused circles, their usual songs replaced by agitated cries. The air itself felt wrong, pressed down heavy on the shoulders, made breathing feel like work. Even the white folks noticed shift and uncomfortable in the big house, Master Hawthorne barking orders at his wife to prepare storm supplies. But it wasn't just weather that was brewing. The cotton crop had failed that summer. Blue weevils had come through like a plague of biblical proportions. Music destroying months of labor, promising financial ruin for the plantation. Master Hawthorne was already in a foul mood, drinking heavier than usual, his temper shorter than ever. He needed someone to blame, needed an outlet for his rage and fear. Naturally, he chose Lily. The accusation came mid-morning when Cyrus Boone reported that 3 sacks of seed cotton had gone, music missing from the gin house. No evidence pointed to Lily specifically, but Hawthorne didn't need evidence. He needed music, a scapegoat, needed to reassert his dominion over the one slave who'd consistently refused to be fully broken. "Bring her to the post," he ordered, his voice carrying across the yard where Lily was music carrying water as always, her eyes occasionally flickering toward the big house where Hope Sarah worked. This daughter she couldn't acknowledge, couldn't protect, couldn't even speak to. Great God in heaven. When Lily heard them words, she knew this was it. The moment she'd been counting toward, preparing for, surviving toward. Music. She had 775 scars already. She needed 600 to fulfill the prophecy. But she'd miscounted somewhere in her fevered reckoning. The number wasn't about what she'd received. It was about what was coming. This would be the punishment that completed the count. The final chapter before the book closed, and a new one opened. They dragged her to the whip-on post while the storm clouds gathered darker overhead while thunder rumbled in the distance, music like God clearing his throat for a pronouncement. All the enslaved folks was called to witness once again, forced to watch this ritual of domination they'd seen too many times before. Master Hawthorne stood on his porch, outlined against them bruise-cold clouds, and declared 300 lashes for theft for the failed crop she must have cursed with her hoodoo ways, for her continued defiance of proper submission, and for any and all sins she's committed against this household. 300 added to 775, that would make 1,075 total. But Lily knew with that knowing that had been with her since birth that this weapon wouldn't reach its full count. The ancestors had other plans. The storm had other intentions. They tied her to the post, stripped her back bare once more. That landscape of scars, raised and silvered, pink and angry, cross-hatched and overlapped, was exposed to the strange green light filtering through the storm clouds. Looked like a map of suffering, a testament written in flesh, a gospel of endurance that even the hardest hearts should weep to see. As Cyrus Boone raised the whip for the first strike, the wind suddenly picked up fierce and strong, whipping through the quarters like it was trying to blow away sin itself. The first lash fell. One thunder cracked simultaneous, so loud folks jumped. The second lash, 2 lightnings split the sky, illuminating everything in harsh white light. By the 10th lash, rain started falling, not gentle but in sheets, in torrents, in waves that seemed to come horizontal rather than down. By the 20th, the wind was howling like all the hounds of hell was loose. By the 30th, it was clear this wasn't no ordinary storm. This was a hurricane, a tempest of biblical proportions. The kind of weather that old folks talked about in hushed voices. The kind that flattened plantations and drowned whole counties. The kind that seemed sent by angry gods to remake the world. "Keep going," Hawthorne shouted over the roar of wind and rain, his voice nearly lost. "Don't stop till I say." But nature wasn't listening to him no more. At the 40th lash, a massive oak tree at the edge of the quarters, one that had stood for 200 years, groaned and fell, crashing down mere feet from where the enslaved witnesses huddled. At the 50th, part of the barn roof tore away, metal and wood spinning through the air like deadly toys. Lily hung from the post, rain mingling with blood, her body being battered by wind and whip alike, and she started laughing. Not the laugh of someone broken, but the laugh of someone who finally understands the cosmic joke, who sees the pattern complete itself, who recognizes divine intervention when it arrives in the form of natural fury. "You hear that?" she shouted to Hawthorne through the storm. "That's the sound of accounts come and due. That's the voice of every ancestor who crossed the Middle Passage. That's the cry of every child sold away. The storm knows. The earth knows. Heaven itself knows." At the 75th lash, the whip-on post itself, that cursed tree that had drunk so much blood over the decades, started to crack, split right down the middle like God himself had taken an axe to it. The iron ring that held Lily's bonds wrenched loose, and she fell forward into the mud, still bound, but no longer anchored. The sky opened up then. Not just rain, but hail. Chunks of ice the size of hen eggs pelting down smashing windows in the big house, bent in the metal roof of the gin house, sending everyone scrambling for shelter. Everyone except Lily, who lay in that mud feeling the ice pounder scarred back and laughing at the beautiful violence of it all. Master Hawthorne stood on his porch, rage battling with fear on his face. He wanted to continue the punishment, wanted to reach his 300 count. Music. But the storm had other ideas. A massive gust of wind, strong enough to lift a grown man, caught him and flung him backward through his own front door. His wife screamed. Overseers ran for cover, and in the chaos, while the world seemed to be ending around them, Mama Dee and Sister Ruth dragged Lily toward the quarters, hauled her inside the nearest cabin, cut her bonds with shaken hands while the storm raged outside like the wrath of righteousness made manifest. Lily sat on the floor, drenched in rain and blood and mud, her back tearing from 75 fresh wounds added to 775 old ones. And she looked at the old women with wild, knowing eyes. 850, she said, her destroyed voice somehow carrying over the howl of wind. But I ain't reaching 600 the way I thought. The number ain't about what I receive, it's about what I give. 600 lashes is what Master Hawthorne going to feel before this is over. 600 strikes of justice, 600 marks of retribution. The storm raged for 3 days and 3 nights. It destroyed half the cotton crop that had survived the weevils. It collapsed the gin house. It flooded the fields. It transformed Ironwood Plantation from a profitable enterprise into a financial disaster that would take years to recover from, if it ever did. When the storm finally passed and the sun emerged weak and watery, the world looked different. Trees were down. Buildings were damaged. The very landscape had been rearranged by wind and water and divine fury. And in the quarters, Lily was healing again, slower this time, her body pushed past its limits, but her spirit somehow stronger than ever. She'd survived 850 lashes now. She'd been whipped in the middle of a hurricane and lived to tell about it. The signs couldn't be clearer. She was protected, ordained, destined for something bigger than her own survival. Hope Sarah came to her that first night after the storm, snuck out of the big house while everyone was still reeling from the damage, found her way to the quarters, and knelt beside the woman she didn't know was her mother. "Are you all right?" the girl asked, her young voice filled with concern. And Lily, breaking every rule Hawthorne had set, risking everything, reached out and touched her daughter's face, gentle as prayer. "I will be child soon as the count is complete. Soon as justice comes due, you just stay safe and stay strong because freedom's coming. I feel it in the wind. I see it in the storm. This plantation's days are numbered. And when the end comes, you and me going to walk out of here together. That's my promise. Now you see people. We come to the heart of darkness itself, to the moment when all the counting, all the suffering, all the preparation would be tested like golden fire. It was October 1874. 2 months after the hurricane had torn through Ironwood like God's own judgment. And Master Elias Hawthorne was a desperate man. Desperate men do desperate things, and cruel men do cruel things. So, a desperate and cruel man does things that defy all reason and mercy. The plantation was dying. The failed cotton crop, combined with storm damage and the financial panic that was spreading through the South, had pushed Hawthorne to the edge of ruin. He'd borrowed heavy against next year's harvest, but with half his fields destroyed and his labor force restless after that biblical tempest, profits was looking unlikely. Banks was circling like vultures. Music. Other planters whispered about his misfortune with barely concealed satisfaction. And through it all, Lily remained unbroken, unbowed, a constant reminder of his failure to dominate completely, to crush totally, to own absolutely. Her very existence was an insult to his authority, a challenge to his manhood, a wound to his pride that festered and refused to heal. So on a cold October morning when frost kissed the ground white and breath steamed in the air, Hawthorne made his final move. He called every soul on the plantation to gather, enslaved and free, field hands and house servants, children and elders, and he announced his intention with a voice that shook from rage and something else, something that might have been fear. "This plantation is falling apart," he declared, standing on a hastily erected platform in the yard. "Crops failing, storms destroying, profits vanishing. And I know why. There's a cancer here, a source of corruption, a vessel of hoodoo evil that's been cursing this land since the day she was born." He pointed at Lily, and everyone knew what was coming. "I've tried to break her. God knows I've tried. 850 lashes over the years, and she still stands there with that defiant look, still refuses proper submission. Well, no more. Today we end this. Today I whip her till she breaks, or till she dies." Music. 600 lashes in one session. Public execution by flagellation. Let it be a lesson to every one of you about what happens to those who resist the natural order. Lord have mercy. 600 lashes in a single day. No human body could survive that. Even Lily, who'd endured things that should have killed her 100 times over, couldn't possibly withstand such brutality. This wasn't punishment. This was murder, plain and simple, dressed up in the language of discipline and order. But as they dragged Lily to the reconstructed weapon post, built stronger after the storm, reinforced with iron, erected like a monument to cruelty, something strange happened. She didn't resist, didn't fight. Music didn't plead. She walked calm and steady, her scarred back straight, her knowing eyes fixed on some distant point that only she could see. In the crowd of forced witnesses, Music Mama D began praying in that old African tongue. Sister Ruth wept openly, and Hope Sarah, that precious child caught in this nightmare, stood frozen with horror, not fully understanding but sensing that something terrible and tremendous was about to unfold. They tied Lily to the post, arms stretched wide, body exposed. Cyrus Boone stood ready with the whip, that devil's tool that had tasted her blood so many times before. But as he raised his arm for the first strike, Lily spoke. Her destroyed voice, usually barely more than a rasp, suddenly carried clear and strong across the yard. "Go ahead," she said. "Start the count. But know this, every lash you give me, Music, I'm taken from you. Every mark you make on my flesh, I'm writing down in blood and memory. You think you count into 600, I've been counting for 29 years, and when this is over, if I live or if I die, the debt comes due. Music. The ledger gets balanced, justice gets served, the first lash fell. 1. Lily didn't scream, she whispered. 1 for my mama Rose, who died birthing me. 1 for my first love, Josiah. Music. Sold away before we could build a life. 1 for my baby son, auctioned like livestock. Second lash. 2. 2 for my daughter Rose, ripped from my breast. 2 for my baby Grace, hunted down when I tried to hide her. 2 for all the mothers who've lost children to this evil system. The pattern continued. With each lash, Lily named a person, a crime, a sin committed against her people. She transformed her punishment into testimony, her suffering into witness, her agony into accusation. The crowd listened in amazement and horror as she turned the weapon into a sermon, the post into a pulpit, her broken body into a living indictment of slavery itself. By the 100th lash, her back was a ruin. By the 200th, she'd stopped naming specific people and started naming principles, freedom, dignity, humanity, justice. By the 300th, she'd fallen silent, but her lips still moved in what might have been prayer or might have been curses or might have been both. Cyrus Boone's arm had long since tired, so other overseers took turns. The whip passed from hand to hand like a relay race of cruelty, each man adding his contribution to the spectacle of violence. Blood pooled beneath the post, ran in rivulets across the packed earth, soaked into Georgia soil that had drunk so much of our people's blood over the generations. At 400 lashes, Lily's consciousness began to fade. She drifted in that space between life and death where the ancestors dwell, where the veil between worlds grows thin. She saw visions. Her mama Rose standing in a field of white flowers, her lost love, Josiah, reaching out from across a great distance, her 3 known babies playing together in some place beyond pain. And she saw something else. Herself standing in flames, holding a whip in her own hand, while Ironwood Plantation burned behind her, and her daughter, Hope Sarah, stood beside her, free and whole and unbroken. At 500 lashes, medical reality should have intervened. No body, no matter how strong or how protected by ancestors, or how determined by will, should survive such trauma. But Lily's heart kept beating, her lungs kept drawing breath. Her spirit, that unbreakable core that had sustained her through everything, refused to surrender. The crowd had long since stopped being mere witnesses. They'd become participants in something larger, something ritual and mystical. Some wept openly, others prayed. A few sang spiritual so soft they was almost whispers. And through it all, there was a sense that this wasn't just punishment. This was transformation, crucible, the moment when suffering reaches its apex and either destroys completely or transcends into something else entirely. At 550 lashes, the sky began to darken again, not storm clouds this time, but something stranger. The sun seemed to dim even though there was no clouds, as if creation itself was turning away from what was happening on this cursed ground. At 575, Lily's body went completely limp. For a moment, everyone thought she'd finally died, that the count would never reach 600, that Hawthorne had won through sheer brutality if nothing else. But then, sweet Jesus, then her eyes opened. Just a crack, music, just enough to see through swollen lids, but they opened. And in them was a light that wasn't music, natural, wasn't human, was something older and more terrible than slavery, older than the Middle Passage, old as the first injustice ever committed. "Keep going," she whispered, her voice somehow audible despite the music damage, despite the impossibility. "Finish the count. I ain't dead yet, and I got promises to keep." The final 25 lashes fell in a silence so profound it seemed like the world itself was holding its breath. 576, 587, 598, 599, 600. When the final lash fell. When the count was complete, when the number that had haunted Lily's countenance for years was finally, music, reached. Something changed. The air itself seemed to shift. The strange darkness that had settled over the plantation lifted, and though Lily's body hung limp and seemingly lifeless from the post, everyone present felt music it. This wasn't an ending, this was a beginning. They cut her down, expecting a corpse. What they got instead was music, something that scared them more. A woman who was somehow still breathing, still alive, still possessed of that knowing look even through eyes swollen nearly shut. Mama D and Sister Ruth carried her to the quarters, laid her on her stomach, and began the familiar ritual of tending wounds that should have been fatal. But this time, as they cleaned blood and applied picuses, as they whispered prayers and sang soft spirituals, they noticed something. Lily's lips were moving. She was counting. Still. Music counting, but not up anymore. Now she was counting down. 600, 599, 598. And when Mama D leaned close to ask what she meant, Lily's eyes opened clear and terrible and knowing, and she whispered, "The count is complete. The debt is recorded. Now comes the payment. Now comes the reckoning. Now comes the day when the whipped become the whipper, when the last become first. When justice, real justice, not the white man's justice, gets served. Tell everyone the prophecy is fulfilled. The 600 is reached. And when I rise from this bed, and I will rise, Ironwood Plantation burns. Listen here, child, 'cause now we come to the moment when everything changed. When the hunted became the hunter. When the whipped took hold of the whip itself. It was 3 days after them. 600 lashes. 3 days that Lily spent hovering between this world and the next. Her body broken, but her spirit forged into something harder than iron, sharper than any blade. The healing was different this time. Mama D said it herself. This ain't natural. Her wounds closing faster than they should, like something beyond us is doing the work. The old woman applied her picuses and whispered her prayers. But she knew. They all knew that what was keeping Lily alive wasn't root work or medicine. It was purpose. It was destiny. It was the ancestors themselves breathing life back into her lungs because her work wasn't finished yet. On the morning of the 4th day, Lily opened her eyes fully for the first time. The swelling had gone down enough that she could see clear, and what she saw was Sister Ruth sitting beside her bed, keeping watch like she'd done every night since the 600. "How you feeling, child?" Sister Ruth asked, her voice heavy with worry and wonder mixed together. Lily sat up slow, testing her body, feeling the way her back pulled and ached, but held together despite the impossible damage. "I feel," she said, her destroyed voice somehow carrying new strength. "Like I've been reborn, like I died under them lashes and came back as something else, something they can't own no more, something they should fear." She stood, ignoring Sister Ruth's protests, and walked to the small, cracked mirror hanging on the cabin wall. What looked back at her was barely recognizable as the woman she'd been. Her face was gaunt, aged beyond her 29 years, marked by suffering that should have killed her 10 times over. But her eyes, Lord have mercy, her eyes burned with a fire that seemed music to come from somewhere beyond herself. "Where's Cyrus Boone?" Lily asked, her tone calm, but carrying something underneath that made Sister Ruth shiver. He's at the overseer's cabin. Been drinking heavy since the 600, muttering about devils and curses, scared of his own shadow." "Good," Lily said simply. "Fear is the beginning of wisdom, and he about to get a whole education in fear." That night, when the moon was just a sliver in the sky and darkness lay heavy over Ironwood Plantation, Lily did what she'd been preparing for, training for, surviving toward for all these years. She wrapped herself in a dark shawl, moved silent as a spirit through the quarters, and made her way to the overseer's cabin. Cyrus Boone was exactly where Sister Ruth said he'd be, drunk and alone, his whip hanging on the wall beside his bed like always. Music. That devil's tool never far from his reach. But tonight, for the first time in his cruel life, he wasn't the one reaching for it. Lily slipped through the unlocked door, quiet as death itself. She crossed the room in 3 steps, her bare feet making no sound on the wooden floor. She reached for the whip, that same instrument that had torn her flesh 850 times, that had drunk her blood like wine, that had been the symbol of her oppression for her entire life. Her fingers closed around the handle. The weight was exactly what she remembered from her secret music practice sessions. The balance was familiar from all her studying. The braided leather felt almost alive in her hand, like it recognized her, like it had been waiting for this moment as long as she had. Cyrus Boone stirred in his drunken music sleep, some instinct warning him that something was wrong. His eyes opened, focused slowly, and when he saw Lily standing there holding his whip, the blood drained from his face like water from a broken bucket. "No," he whispered, music, trying to sit up, trying to reach for the pistol he kept under his pillow. "You can't. You're supposed to be dying," Lily finished for him, her voice soft and terrible. I did, and I came back. The ancestors wouldn't let me rest till accounts was settled, till debts was paid, till the whip changed hands." She cracked the whip once, just once, and the sound echoed through the cabin like thunder, like judgment, like every slave's prayer for vengeance finally being answered. Boone scrambled backward, fell out of his music bed, crawled toward the corner like the coward he'd always been underneath his cruelty. "Please," he begged, and the words sounded strange coming from him, a man who'd never shown mercy in his entire life. "Please, I was just following orders." "Hawthorne made me following orders," Lily repeated, testing the words. "That's what every devil says when his time comes due." "But you enjoyed it, didn't you, Cyrus? You smiled when you whipped me, you laughed when you took my babies, you got drunk celebrating after you gave me them 300. So don't talk to me about orders. Talk to me about choices. About the choice you made every single time you raised that whip against defenseless people." She advanced on him slow and deliberate, the whip coiled in her hand. And for the first time in her life, Lily understood the power that overseers felt. The power of holding life and death, pain and mercy in your own hands. It was intoxicating. It was dangerous. It was exactly what she'd sworn to use differently. "I could kill you right now," she said, standing over him. "Could beat you till you died screaming, just like you tried to do to me. Could make you count every lash. Could make you beg and cry and plead, and it wouldn't even begin to balance what you've done. But that ain't why I'm here tonight." Boone looked up at her confused and terrified. Then why?" "To send a message," Lily said, "to let Hawthorne know that his time is coming. To let every overseer, every master, every person who's built their life on our suffering know that the reckoning is here." She raised the whip and brought it down once, just once, across Boone's back. The man screamed like she'd imagined he would, that high-pitched wail of someone experiencing real pain for the first time, someone who dealt it out for years, but never truly understood what it meant to receive it. "That's one," Lily said calmly. "I owe you 600. But I'm going to give them to you slow, one at a time. spread out over however long it takes. Every time you think you're safe, every time you start to relax, I'll be there in the darkness with the whip, and you'll never know when. You'll never know where. You'll just know it's coming the way we always knew. You'll live with that fear every single day until the count is complete. She moved toward the door, the whip coiled in her hand, but paused on the threshold. And Cyrus, if you tell Hawthorne about tonight, if you try to stop what's coming, I'll finish all 600 in one session and you won't survive it. We both know you ain't strong enough to take what I took, so you keep your mouth shut, tend that wound, and wait for the next one, because it's coming. They all coming. Justice moves slow sometimes, but it always arrives. She disappeared into the night, leaving Boone cowering in his cabin, one fresh lash mark across his back, 599 more waiting in his future. When Lily returned to the quarters, the whip hidden under her shawl, she found Mama D waiting for her. The old woman looked at her with eyes that had seen everything in her long life, that understood what Lily had done and what it meant. You crossed a line tonight, Mama D said quietly. Ain't no going back now. I crossed that line the day I was born into this evil system, Lily replied. Tonight, I just started walking in a different direction. The whip is music mine now, the power is mine, and I'm going to use it to tear down everything they built on our backs. She held up the whip for Mama D to see, and in the dim candlelight it looked different somehow. Not a tool of oppression anymore, but an instrument of liberation, a weapon of justice, a symbol of transformation. This is just the beginning, Lily said, music, her voice carrying the weight of prophecy. Boone was the first, but he won't be the last. Music. Every overseer, every slave driver, every person who wielded the whip against us, they all going to feel it in their own flesh. And when I'm done with them, when the count reaches 600 for each of them, then I'm coming for Hawthorne himself. The master going to learn what it means to be mastered, the hunter going to understand how it feels to be hunted, and this whip, this devil's tool that they use to break us, is going to be the instrument of their downfall. Great God in heaven. Now we come to the night when justice, real justice, not the white man's twisted version, finally came to Ironwood Plantation, like fire and flood combined. It was 3 weeks after Lily had taken that first lash from Cyrus Boone. 3 weeks of systematic terror that had the overseers jumping at shadows, sleeping with loaded pistols, drinking themselves into stupors, trying to forget the fear. Boone had 6 more marks on his back now, delivered in darkness when he least expected them. The younger overseer, Thomas, had 3. Even the house servants, who'd been complicit in the cruelty, who'd turned blind eyes to suffering, who'd carried tales to the master, music. They'd felt the kiss of leather too, gentle reminders that no one was safe, that the old order was crumbling. But Master Elias Hawthorne remained untouched, barricaded in his big house, surrounding himself with armed men, convinced that walls and weapons could protect him from what was coming. He didn't understand, couldn't understand that what approached him wasn't just a woman with a whip. It was reckoning itself, judgment made flesh. Every sin he'd ever committed coming home to roost. The moment arrived on a moonless November night, the kind of darkness that seems to swallow sound itself. Lily had planned it careful, had moved pieces into position like a general preparing for battle. The other enslaved folks knew something was happening. You could feel it in the air, that electric anticipation of change so profound, music, it seemed to vibrate in your bones. Hope Sarah had been secretly moved to the quarters earlier that day, smuggled out of the big house during the chaos of a small fire that had mysteriously started in the kitchen. Now she sat with Mama D and Sister Ruth, scared and confused but safe, while her mother, this woman she was just beginning to know, just starting to call by name, prepared for the final confrontation. Lily stood outside her cabin, the whip coiled at her side, dressed in simple dark clothes that would blend with the night. Around her gathered a handful of the strongest souls from the quarters, not to fight. She'd made that clear, but to witness, to testify, to remember what happened this night so they could tell their children and their children's children. That once in the darkness of slavery, one woman stood up and said, "Enough, you don't have to do this alone," Moses said, now grown into a man of 30, still carrying the fire of rebellion that had nearly gotten him hanged years ago. We can rise up together, overwhelm them with numbers. No, Lily said firmly. This ain't about rebellion. This is personal. This is between me and the man who's stolen everything from me. My mama, my loves, my babies, my body, my dignity. This is about one woman taking back what's hers. Y'all bear witness, but the hand that strikes must be mine alone. She walked toward the big house, her bare feet silent on the cold ground, her breath misting in the November air. Behind her, at a distance, her witnesses followed. Shadows among shadows, spirits among the living. The big house loomed white in the darkness, its columns like bones, its windows dark except for one on the second floor where Hawthorne kept his study. He was there, she knew, drinking his expensive whiskey, counting his diminishing money, plotting how to restore his fortune and his authority. Lily didn't knock. She walked through the front door like she owned the place, which in a way she did. Her blood was mixed into the mortar of these walls. Her suffering had paid for every brick. Her stolen labor had built this monument to cruelty. It was as much hers as anyone's. She climbed the stairs slow and deliberate, the whip trailing behind her like a snake, its leather kissing each step with a soft whisper that seemed to say, "Justice, justice, justice." Hawthorne heard her coming. He stood as she entered his study, his hand reaching for the pistol on his desk, his face twisted with rage and something that looked almost like relief, as if he'd been waiting for this, knowing it was inevitable. "So, it's you," he said, his voice slurred from drink. "The one who's been terrorizing my overseers. The one who survived what should have killed you. I should have sold you years ago. Should have had you hanged after the escape attempt. Should have finished the job with them 600 lashes. But you didn't," Lily said, advancing into the room. "And now here we are. You with your pistol and your pride, me with your whip and my purpose." He raised the gun, pointing it at her chest. "I could shoot you right now. End this before it starts." "Go ahead," Lily said, not stopping, not slowing. "Pull that trigger, but we both know it won't matter. I already died under your whip and came back. The ancestors protect me now. And even if you kill this body, my spirit will haunt you forever." Music. "You'll never sleep peaceful again. You'll never escape what you've done." Hawthorne's hand trembled. For the first time in his life, he was facing someone who genuinely didn't fear music death, who'd suffered so much that mortality had lost its sting. He pulled the trigger. The gun misfired. Click. Nothing. He pulled it again. Click. Still nothing. "Even your weapons betray you," Lily said, now standing just feet from him. "Because this ain't your moment. It's mine. This ain't your justice. It's God's, and I'm the instrument he chose to deliver it." She moved faster than Hawthorne could react, knocking the useless pistol from his hand, grabbing him by his fine linen collar and dragging him. Him, the music master, the owner, the man who'd held power over life and death, out of his study, music down his stairs, through his house, and into the yard where her witnesses waited. They'd prepared the whipping post, that same cursed tree that had been rebuilt after the storm. Now it would serve a different purpose. Now the master would feel what the enslaved, music had felt for generations. "Strip his shirt," Lily commanded, and Moses stepped forward to obey, tearing away Hawthorne's fine clothes until his back was bare, white and unmarked, untouched by suffering, innocent of the pain it had ordered inflicted on others. "No!" Hawthorne screamed, struggling against the ropes they used to bind him. "You can't do this. I'm a white man. I'm your master. This is against the law." "Your law?" Lily said, unfurling the whip. "But tonight we operate under a different law, the law of consequences, the law that says what you do returns to you sevenfold, the law that says the first shall be last and the last shall be first." She raised the whip and the gathered witnesses held their breath. This was it, the moment everything changed, the moment a slave raised a hand against her master, not in desperate defense, but in deliberate justice. The first lash fell. Hawthorne screamed, a sound of such shock and pain that it barely seemed human. He'd never felt real suffering before, never understood what it meant to have flesh torn from your back, never comprehended the agony he'd inflicted so casually on others. "That's one," Lily said calmly. "For my Mama Rose, who died birthing me because you wouldn't pay for proper midwife care." Second lash. "Two, for my love Josiah sold away to break my spirit." Third lash. "Three for my son, my first baby, auctioned like livestock." She continued, methodical and merciless, naming each lash, giving each one meaning and weight. This wasn't mindless cruelty. This was accounting. This was every debt being called in, every sin being answered for, every crime receiving its just punishment. By the 20th lash, Hawthorne was begging. By the 50th, he was crying. By the 100th, he was praying, desperate, incoherent prayers for mercy he'd never shown others. "Please," he gasped. "Please, I'll free you all. I'll sign the papers. I'll give you land, money, whatever you want. Just stop. Please, God, make it stop." Lily paused, the whip hanging loose in her hand. "You hear that?" she said to the witnesses. "Now he calls on God. Now he speaks of freedom and fairness. But where was his mercy when I begged him not to take my babies? Where was his compassion when I pleaded for my life at 300 lashes? Where was his humanity through all them years of suffering?" She raised the whip again. The count continued. 200, 300, 400. Hawthorne's back became what Lily's had been, a ruin of torn flesh, a landscape of suffering, a testament to cruelty returned in full measure. At 500 lashes, his consciousness faded. At 550, he hung limp from the post, barely breathing. At 599, Lily stopped, one lash short of 600. The witnesses murmured in confusion. Why stop now? Why leave the count incomplete? Lily coiled the whip and walked around to face Hawthorne's destroyed form. She lifted his head by the hair so their eyes could meet, his glazed with pain, hers burning with that knowing fire. "I'm leaving you one short," she said quietly, not as mercy as reminder. "Every day you live from now on, you'll know there's one more coming, one more you'll never escape, one more that haunts your dreams and stalks your waking hours. You'll spend the rest of your life waiting for the 600th lash, and it will never come. That's your punishment. Not death, not completion, just endless waiting, just the fear we lived, music with every single day." She dropped his head and turned to the crowd. "Ironwood Plantation ends tonight. Anyone who wants to leave, leave. Anyone who wants to stay and try to build something new from these ashes, stay. But the old order is finished. Music. The whip is broken, the chains are shattered. And this man," she gestured at Hawthorne's broken form, "he lives as an example, not of what we were, but of what we'll never be again. Now go. Tell everyone. Tell the whole South. Tell the whole country." Lily Daswat gave justice with the same leather that gave her scars. And the age of masters is over. Now listen close, child, 'cause we come to the ending that's really a beginning. To the moment when one story closes and 1,000 new ones open up like flowers after rain. Music. It was dawn on the day after justice came to Ironwood, and the world looked different. Or maybe it was the same world, but folks was seeing it with new eyes. Master Elias Hawthorne lay in his big house, tended music by his terrified wife, his back destroyed by 599 lashes.